Yeah, he was kind of white with brown and silver. They both passed away.
Welcome, everybody. It is 6 o'clock. I'm going to open the City Council meeting. Will you please stand with me to say the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, thank you. I'm going to start with roll call. Councilman Loy?
Here.
Councilwoman Kesty?
Present.
Councilwoman Diamond?
Present.
Councilman Henderson?
Here.
Councilman Cock?
Present.
Councilman Burns?
Present.
So sorry. And Councilman Lavaca actually did let us know that he won't be here tonight. He is on vacation, and if there isn't any issues, he will be excused. Okay, sounds good. All right, moving on to approval of the agenda. The one thing that I do want to make mention here is that we are adding executive session at the end. It will be a legal discussion about current or potential litigation. So that will come at the end. So approval of the agenda, will you please include executive session? Do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor, I'll make that motion with the addition of the executive session.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'll second that.
Thank you. Okay, I have a motion by Councilman Burns, second by Councilwoman Diamond, adding the agenda with the executive session. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, moving on to consent agenda, items 1 through 6. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
But I do want, oh no, maybe I'm out of order. I do want to comment on one of them.
Okay, let me get a second. Do I have a second?
Motion.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councilman Cock?
Well, I think I actually have two comments. The first was I appreciate the police department's creative disposition of these vehicles. I mean, if we sold them, we wouldn't get anything for them. So very well, smart, creative way to use it for training. And the second one about the interlocal agreement, are we discussing that more in the later thing in the agenda? Yeah, okay, I'll just wait on that then.
Okay, all right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, moving into, we actually have some wonderful events here tonight. We're going to be swearing in 2 new officers. So I'm going to ask Officer Baxen Segura and Officer Holster to come forward, please. Maybe I'll take you one at a time. Someone else? You take the first. Raise your right hand. I, Zamora Baxen Segura,
I, Namara Baxter Segura,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I am a citizen of the United States
that I am a citizen of the United States
and of the state of Washington,
and of the state of Washington,
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution and laws
the Constitution and laws
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution and laws
and the Constitution and laws
of the state of Washington,
of the state of Washington,
and will, to the best of my judgment,
and will to the best of my judgment,
skill, and ability,
skill, and ability,
truly, faithfully,
truly, faithfully,
and impartially perform
and impartially perform
the duties of police officer
the duty of police officer
in the city of Sedro-Woolley,
in the city of Sedro-Woolley,
Skagit County, Washington,
Skagit County, Washington,
as such are the duties prescribed
as such
by law, so help me God.
by law, so help me God.
Congratulations. Welcome. We actually call her Officer Z, and she has been with us, how many months now, Z?
Since October,
Since October, yeah. So it's been a joy of bringing her on, and we're really pleased to have her. I always love to see female officers come into into our department. I think that it shows that we know that a woman can do the job just as well as a man, right? So, anyway, Z, thank you very much, and welcome.
thank you.
Z, officer, I'll need to have you sign here in just a minute. All right. Hostler,
I, Hilton Hostler,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I am a citizen of the United States
that I am a citizen of the United States
and of the state of Washington,
and of the state of Washington,
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and the Constitution and laws
and the Constitution and laws
of the state of Washington,
of the state of Washington,
and I will, to the best of my judgment,
and I will, to the best of my judgment,
skill, and ability,
skill, and ability,
truly, faithfully,
truly, faithfully,
and impartially perform
and impartially perform
the duties of police officer
the duties of police officer
in and for
in and for
the city of Sedro-Woolley,
the city of Sedro-Woolley,
Skagit County, Washington,
Skagit County, Washington,
as such are prescribed by law,
as such are prescribed by law,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Thank you. So, if you would please welcome Officer, Officer Baxton Segura and also Officer Hostler. Now they get to go off and have cake while the rest of us stay here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and we have a special guest tonight, and that is Executive Director of Family Promise of Skagit Valley, Audrey Wall. Audrey. Audrey is going to be giving us an update tonight, and so
Yeah.
we look forward to hearing that.
Hi, so I'm Audrey Wall, Executive Director of Family Promise. I want to say thank you for allowing me to come and share on Family Promise. And I wanted to speak first to a little bit about the background of homelessness for families with children in Skagit County. Through the findings of the 2022 and 2023 school year numbers, we recognize that there's approximately 968 school-age children that are currently homeless. 284 of those students are Sedro-Woolley residents. By national standards, we add an additional 40% for children who are not yet in school, bringing us to a total of 1,400 students that are homeless in Skagit County, which is actually down 200 from a couple years before. So while that's still an extremely staggering number, we are starting to make some progress. Family Promise's part in that is that we serve homeless families with children, and in 2024, we served 196 families with a 96% success rate of preventing them from becoming homeless when they enter into our programs, and 80% of those that enter into our housing programs are stabilized. So today I'm here to report back on how the City of Sedro-Woolley's 1590 funding was spent by Family Promise to address these issues. As a reminder to listeners online and audiences that is here, these are taxpayer dollars that are put to good use. So this is a good representation of how your elected officials are putting good use to your dollars to better our community. Our first priority for funding when allocated this funding was seasonal shelter, which is a drop-in site for families open for every day of the week from November until usually the end of March, dependent on weather. Through this programming this year, we were able to serve 28 families, 89 individuals, 44 children, and 28% of those were Sedro-Woolley residents. 3 were stabilized into permanent housing, 9 moved up into shelter, and 12 moved to friends or family or other shelters. We unfortunately did have 2 discharges, which is an extremely low rate for an emergency shelter of this nature, giving us an 82% success rate out of a drop-in shelter, which is highly unheard of. So I was very proud when I read those numbers this week. Then moving on to our shelter funding. This funding supports our year-round shelter that we have hosted, our day center here in Sedro-Woolley for. The 1590 funding helped support our shelter assistant who supports the daily operation and care of every client that goes through the shelter. Over the last 6 months since we receiving this funding, we have been able to serve a total of 16 families, 48 individuals, and 25 children, 25% of which were Sedro-Woolley residents. 4 of those moved on to permanent housing, 5 moved up into our transitional houses, 2 moved into relatives' houses that were good permanent outcomes for them, and 5 are still in our shelter, giving us, again, an 82% success rate out of a shelter, which is double what the national standard is. I did want to note that transitional housing this year has been one of our hardest programs. Families in our transitional program have been struggling more this year than ever. We have had a large amount of repairs that also needed to be done in our housing. So unfortunately, we had to shut down 2 of our Sedro-Woolley transitional housing units. So 2 weeks ago, we came and the council decided to amend our contract to allow us to use funding for all housing programs. We had 3 dads this year that lost their jobs and 2 family separations. Housing insecurity is extremely hard on the kiddos, but it's also extremely hard on a relationship. So thanks to the recent verbiage changes, we were able to secure and stabilize program fees and additional support to all the clients in our transitional housing, stabilizing that program, and I hope to come back in a couple months and give you some data on that. 2 weeks just wasn't enough time to pull all that data. So finally, the big star of the show is our homeless prevention program. This program ensures that children never have to enter a shelter and into homelessness. It reduces the impact to our entire system and is an extremely cost-effective program. The City of Sedro-Woolley funding supported our part-time Spanish-speaking prevention specialist. Well, he was able to serve 9 Sedro-Woolley residents with immediate assistance using the 1590 funding. The story goes a bit deeper than that. Their job as housing specialists are to work on resourcing out before we spend money to stabilize families. Through this program, we were able to serve 61 families in the last 6 months, 210 individuals and 128 children, 25% of which were Sedro-Woolley residents. Just this week, Joseph was able to serve one of our hardworking Sedro-Woolley residents, single mom working 2 jobs, and was able to help her get from homeless to housed without ever having to enter into the housing system. 48 families were transitioned and stabilized in the last 6 months out of our homeless prevention program, and 23 families are still actively being served. That is a 100% success rate in our homeless prevention program. We have never seen that happen before, and that is because we had the wraparound funding that was needed to meet those unique situations. So I know that's a lot of different numbers that I kind of threw at you, so if I have a couple more minutes, I'd just like to summarize what that whole total equals out to. Not including transitional housing, over the last 6 months, with the support of the 1590 funding, we were able to serve 105 families. 27% of those families were Sedro-Woolley residents, and 55 families were permanently housed and stabilized. 197 children were reached because of this funding. From me and all the families, thank you. And thank you to the taxpayers of Sedro-Woolley. Our future is really reflected in the eyes of the children that we serve, and they deserve to feel loved, supported. Every child deserves to have a home and to thrive within that home. So we still have $66,000 left in this funding. We know that we will have that spent down probably before October at the rate that funding cuts are happening throughout our other contracts. So, yeah. Do you guys have any questions for me? That's a lot of numbers. I'm glad to send these over to you. I know we have somebody missing in attendance, so I can send all this stuff to you guys too.
Yeah, send them to Kelly, and Kelly will make sure that they get out to everybody, so thank you. I also want to thank you for coming in tonight and giving the presentation. And I have to say, your organization probably does a tremendous amount of work with very little staff that you have. It's really, you are a miracle worker, you really are. So thank you. Yeah. Any questions for Audrey? Go ahead, Councilman Burns.
Not a question, it's a statement. Thank you for what you do in the community. I really appreciate your support for people who need it when they're having a hard time. And the dedication of your staff is amazing to me, because I go to church where you have your offices, and I'll see your staff in there on a Sunday. They are working around the clock to make sure that they're helping people. So I'm really impressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Henderson?
Yep. Thanks for coming in. Again, Audrey, it's always nice to see you.
Thank you.
And I'm really blown away with the numbers, and this really makes me happy that we definitely made a conscious effort to keep Sedro-Woolley dollars in Sedro-Woolley helping out, and you guys you're killing it. So keep up the hard work.
I appreciate that.
Councilman Cock?
Yeah, I'm just going to echo that. Thank you for the wonderful work you do in Sedro-Woolley. I'm going to opine for a minute. As a former newspaper editor, I read all the news, and the business news, Wall Street Journal, Barron's, Reuters. I'm no economist, but they're leaning toward 50-50, coin flip on a recession. Even more concerning, Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, warned about stagflation coming up, where you have high inflation and a struggling economy. I lived through that in the 70s after the Arab oil embargo, and it's ugly. So I just want to warn you that I don't know the things, just be prepared for things possibly getting worse. We certainly hope not.
Thank you. Councilman Dimon?
Oh, I just wanted to thank you and reiterate that the fact that you're coming through with the positive success rate numbers that you have is amazing. And I would just like to know what you think sets you apart here in the city of Sedro-Woolley from some of the other organizations that maybe are not having the same sort of success rates that are out there. Because we've had lots of presentations, and some presentations have come in with a 0% success rate. And as somebody that is voting here with the rest of the council to put tax-paying dollars towards creating opportunity to help people in our community, it's really hard to vote for something that doesn't have success rates.
Right.
And I'm just wondering if there's something that you think you guys are doing, or what is it that is giving you those positive numbers and those successes?
Yeah, I would say there's a few things. One is we are backed by a national organization, so we get feedback across the nation. So a lot of times if something big's happening, we get feedback from the United States government before other people do it sometimes. So that helps us stay a little bit ahead of the curve. But a lot of it really is partnership and teamwork. We believe we were built on what the community needed. So we are only this big at 10 years. This is our 10 years, because the community needed it and they wrapped around it. So our goal is always partnership. And we do our best to take one partnership at a time so we can grow and grow and grow that, and then, kind of bring more people in. But teamwork is another part of that. Not one of these cases is one person's doing, right? And the final thing is we recognize that once somebody comes into our programming, they're like a part of our family, right? So we're going to see that through to the best of our ability. And sometimes that does mean moving them to another agency because it's the best thing for them. But a lot of times we continue following those cases. So people will come back when they're ready, and then we'll see success out of that as well. So
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
You have churches wrap around you too, though, which
We
is
do.
really beautiful.
Businesses,
Yeah.
corporations, just a lot of service clubs. It really is a community effort.
It truly is. Thank you. Councilwoman Castile.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I have a question. If 25% of the people are Sedro-Woolley residents, where are the others coming from?
Yeah, I just pulled these numbers. They're about, I think 70% of them are Skagit County at large. I have some more data on that. The other high number is definitely Mount Vernon, with a little bit lower going into Burlington, and 5% are outlying Skagit County areas, because we will serve people that have a root in Skagit County. So maybe they've gone away for schooling or moved away from family, but then need to come back to be stable. And then we'll also send people out. Does that make sense? So there's a little bit of that.
Okay, because I was just curious, if it's only 25% are Sedro-Woolley residents, and the others are from the outskirts of it, do you really see a huge need in Sedro-Woolley, like as far as our
Definitely.
community is
Yes.
concerned? if
So
it's
I would
25?
say those homeless numbers that I told you about children, we are like, oh gosh, I wish I had them from me. I will attach them to a report and send them to you. We're like literally like 40 children less than Mount Vernon. And per capita, that's alarming. So these kind of funding sources that allow me to do my best to start digging in here will allow us to grow the partnerships here. Funding doesn't always come to Sedro-Woolley, so we do get pulled them out. Like I get more funding for Mount Vernon to serve Mount Vernon. if that makes sense. So, but we're always trying to serve, you know, locally first. So, yes, there are some comparisons in that. And I do see Sedro-Woolley residents where we have to relocate them because we just can't meet the difference in the housing expense here.
Can you touch a little bit about where these people in your group are housed? Is it only at your church, or is it at another church as well, or how are you housing them?
Yes, so our shelter rotation model originally was, I think it's like 27 churches. So we have a day center here in Sedro-Woolley. From 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. they can be at the day center. And it used to be that they would always go out to a church from 5 p.m. and we'd use that space that churches have available 6 days a week. And then post-pandemic, we've lost quite a bit of that support. We're trying to regrow it, but churches have staggered in their ability to support and volunteerism. The donor dollars that we're experiencing a depletion in, they're also experiencing a depletion in. So we now host more here in Sedro-Woolley than we did before. But yeah, and then our transitional housing are staggered. So we had 4 units here in Sedro-Woolley and 2 units in Mount Vernon and 1 in Bow, but we've shrunk that down a little bit because we're about to open up something a little bit bigger. Now we have 2 units here in Sedro-Woolley and 1 in Mount Vernon.
Okay. You also were looking to purchase what was the parsonage in Sedro-Woolley.
Yes, we're on the cusp of that.
Okay.
I'm just waiting on the short plot. So that's the other funding that we have been having pending from the 1406 funding.
Okay.
So we're just waiting on that final short plot, and then we will be purchasing that parsonage.
All right, excellent. All right. Yes, go ahead.
Since we're touching on that,
Yeah, totally.
So if you purchase that, then will it be rezoned, or how does that work? To do what you're doing if it was through churches,
We've already been in that-
Is it not going to be a church anymore?
No, it's just their parsonage house. We've already been operating in that house since 2017. And so we're in kind of the semi-silent phase of some bigger projects that are about to happen. And one of those was to begin owning some of our properties so that when we have recessions or pandemics, we're not having to just release people because we don't have control over our programming. So when we purchase that, it will still remain transitional housing. We will be subdividing it, and it won't be a part of the church, but it really has been operating under Family Promise since 2017.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, thank you again for coming in, giving us an update. It's exciting to hear that these kinds of things are actually happening within our community, that we can give back. It's very nice. Thank you.
Thank you, and let me know if you guys need me to come back.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, moving on to City Administrator Report. Charlie?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Johnson. Council, no report this evening.
All right. Councilman, Councilman Lowe?
Well, last week we had a meeting for our skateboard challenge, and I think we've got it pretty well lined up. And we're gonna put on vendors this year, food trucks and stuff, and so we're gonna get out of the food business and let the vendors come in. So I think that's probably the big time saver for us. So that's it.
Excellent. We look forward to that. Thank you. Councilwoman Kesty.
Thank you. I wanted to give a special thank you to Ron Brown, the American Legion, and all the volunteers who come out every Thursday before Memorial Day and place flags at all of our veterans' headstones, to Cliff and Ross at the cemetery because they make it look so beautiful. The Parks Department comes out and helps them. And I'd also like to encourage all of you to attend the Memorial Day service the Legion puts on next year. And last, I'd like to invite you all to the Sedro-Woolley's For the Love of Northern State event. It will be June 6th and 7th, Friday and Saturday, Friday at 6:30 and Saturday at 11 and 1 to talk about Northern State Hospital's history.
Councilwoman Diamond.
Good evening. I just wanted to note that I did attend the Memorial Day ceremony at the Union Cemetery. It looked absolutely beautiful, so Thank you to the parks and all of the people that came forward and donated their time and energy to that. It was pretty well attended, and it really gave purpose to the true meaning of what the holiday is and why we are there. So I would encourage anybody that has the opportunity to attend to go, because it truly does bring meaning to the weekend and to what Memorial Day is. I also attended the Finance and IT Committee meeting tonight. I'll let Councilman Henderson touch a little bit further on that. Secondly, I've been asked to remind everybody that the Sedro-Woolley Youth Soccer registration does close here at the end of the month. So if you have any children, grandchildren, friends, family of youth sports age that's interested, there are signups online and available through the Sedro-Woolley Youth Soccer Association. And then I've also just been getting a couple constituents complaining about speeding up and down Highway 9 and then transitioning itself through Township, speeding through Ferry Street, speeding on State Street, and all of the regular routes there in Ward 3. And then outside of that, just a reminder, as there are more people traveling and walking their animals and kids out and about and bicycles, with that speeding also comes people not paying attention when they're crossing the road. So I've also had a couple neighbors ask that I remind and the community, as well as if there's anything that police can do just to kind of remind people to pay attention when they're crossing the street, doing all the common things that should be common sense. But it's nice out, people get excited, they are chasing balls across the street or their friends or whatever the case could be, but that could lead to a very unfortunate accident. So passing along the reminders as was requested of me. Thank you.
Councilman Henderson.
Thank you. This evening, we had the Finance and Information Technology Committee meeting. We discussed the property tax levy increase limit to 1%, and we're going to be doing that limiting language by resolution. We decided instead of running it through an ordinance, and this was in response to the tax levy increase that failed this year in the down there in the state legislature. So it didn't go through, but we're still going to put that forward by resolution to limit it to the 1%. We had a discussion on the 2025 budget amendment number 1. The discussion was about our IT needs, and we had a brief summary of our financial reserve. And then we'll be bringing to full council a business license endorsement, municipal code update. And a lot of the clarification there is that Sedro-Woolley doesn't issue business licenses. We endorse business licenses that are issued by the state. And then we rescheduled our next committee meeting to October 1st. And that'll be before our, we have a workshop that night, and we're gonna do our committee meeting before that workshop. Also in that meeting, Charlie touched on the unlicensed vendor that we've had in town over the last about month. They were served papers by the health department, and so we're not gonna be dealing with that anymore. And then, Bill, I was gonna ask about if a follow-up on the 4th and Warner intersection, if you guys had time to go look at that drop that comes when you're going into the intersection.
Yes, sir, as part of Nathan's list to go evaluate and figure out what the best way to correct that is.
Okay, awesome. And then I just received additional comments from the public about the sidewalks along 4th and along Talcott, there in that epicenter of 4th Street that are not skateboardable, so.
Not skateboardable? That, I know that's a pretty good measure. I have never really heard it before, but gives you good vision. So, some of the different sidewalk challenges we have in that area, mainly due to like tree root damage and whatnot, been discussing as a department as well as the senior management team. One of the things we are looking into, so City of Bellingham has a gravel surface that's ADA compliant. They have it on a lot of their trails, Cornwall Trail and those types of things. And one of the thought processes, just because replacing that much sidewalk is a rather expensive endeavor, is to maybe convert some of those sidewalks more to a cinder path. The limestone spec that City of Bellingham has packs down very well and does not pothole easily, so to speak. But that would give us an ability, as tree roots grow, we could actually adjust that path to go over them and be something that's much easier for our maintenance department to maintain. And then at such a date, it also makes an excellent subgrade for new sidewalk in the future as we figure out how, and street trees that create that much damage is a challenge for, I think, every public works department in the state. And rather, I mean, you have an option of cutting them down and removing tree roots, which creates a giant hole. So there's kind of a challenge there, but this might be a good interim capability to give a much safer, less trip hazard approach to some of these sidewalks. And so I'm taking a look at what the inventory would be, which ones we want to tackle first, that type of thing, to come up in the near future anyway.
Could we pick like a small section somewhere
Yeah.
in the city that somebody would agree to and pilot that program?
Yeah, that's part of what I want to do with, sorry, I don't know if my microphone went out. Yeah, I want to step into that and just see how well it works. I don't want to do it all at once and all of a sudden have something that's unmanageable for our department either. So that's the plan, is maybe pick a block, try it out, get people used to it, and hopefully have more people say, please do that in front of my house. That would be great. But yeah, that's the creative solution I've come up with so far. Because the biggest challenge of this is you put new sidewalk in and more roots just grow back and destroy what you just invested in within a few years. And with trees that big, doing the modern root guard system and stuff just doesn't work because they're such big mammoth trees that they really have a lot of force they apply. It's amazing what their roots do to things. So yes, it's something we're well aware of, and I'm working with both my maintenance folks as well as my engineering folks to try to figure out really what the best solution is.
Thank you.
Yes,
very
sir.
much.
Councilman Cock?
Yes, another one for Bill, I guess. I wanted to just thank you and the city staff for the work starting. I saw the stakes out at Olmsted Park, and that's exciting and wonderful, and I've had several people say to me how much they are looking forward to having that cool park in our neighborhood. Just a reminder, especially for the folks over in Wildflower neighborhood, to hold down the dust and noise and that kind of thing. And also, we had received some sort of, a second thing, we'd received concern that I do want to echo, coming down, south on Township Highway 9, where all of us have taken that road. You're driving 20 miles from Acme, 50 miles an hour, and suddenly you're supposed to slow down. Well, a lot of people don't. And I think and you're also coming down that hill too, which makes it even worse. So just my observation.
All right, thank you. Councilman Burns?
First, I wanted to thank everybody from the American Legion and the volunteers, Parks Department, for what they did for Memorial Day. That was a wonderful service, and I appreciate Mayor Johnson's speech. You did a wonderful job helping commemorate Memorial Day. Excuse me. Two things. I had a constituent ask me about this. Three-way stop possibly being temporarily put in at Ferry and Township Street for the 4th of July. They said that they sit outside and basically just watch people try to get into an accident at that intersection. I suspect Councilman Allen's probably seen roughly the same thing. I don't know the safety. I'd have safety concerns with putting an officer out there, which was their other idea, not to mention you're already short-staffed for that day. but if there was a possibility of renting a three-way stoplight, something like that, I don't know what we could do that would make it a little bit safer. The other thing that I wanted to touch on was the possibility of the gravel paths. Almost every person I've talked to on Railroad Avenue has requested sidewalks on there, and I explained that's not something the city normally does, but if we were able to do something a lot cheaper, like a gravel path, that would at least create a safe place for people to walk, because there's a lot of people in my area that like to go for walks, not very many sidewalks in comparison to the rest of the city. So just something to keep in mind as you're looking at planning down the road. Thank you.
Excellent suggestion, actually. Yeah, thank you. Good report. So I want to remind the council that on June 6th, we're going to be having it'll be a symposium, and the symposium will consist of the county commissioners, the mayors from the area, and then all of the council members were also invited. I want to thank Councilman Cockloy and Diamond for signing up. They will be attending it. And it's a great opportunity to do just what Family Promise was talking about tonight, which was taking funding, putting it together, and providing housing for those who need housing, services for those who need services, and also providing housing for the homeless. So it's going to be a good symposium and a chance to really learn a lot. So thank you, council members, for signing up and being willing to attend. I also want to mention the American Legion. I think they do an amazing job. They're dwindling in numbers, and it saddens me to see that, because they have been faithful to our country, not just in just their service, but they have continued on even forward to today, reminding us that we do need to remember those who have served, but especially those who gave all. For the 8 years that I've been mayor, I've had opportunity, been invited by them to provide opportunity to speak, and I'm always honored, and I always hope that my words honor them. I also have the opportunity to go out to Country Meadows. I've been doing that as well. That is also very meaningful to me. There's a lot of people who actually have lived through World War II, and they've lost family in Vietnam or Korean War, and so being able to do a ceremony out there where we remember their loved ones or people that they had lost is also very meaningful. And though we've moved beyond Memorial Day on Monday, I hope we always carry in our hearts the servicemen, both those who have served, and thank you, Councilman Henderson, for your service. He has served. Remember those who have served, but also those who have gave all. So, yeah, I'm very grateful that we have these holidays. The last thing that I want to share is that we heard this past week that the funding that it was Representative Eslick, Representative Lowe, Senator Wagoner, myself, and two citizens, John Horn and Carrie Davidson, we came together and decided that we wanted to do something that was honoring and befitting of the historic Northern State Cemetery. And so we met on several occasions. We put together a plan. Nathan Salsina, who is our Public Works Manager, came out on the last couple meetings, and he actually put together the funding proposal. We submitted it, and it passed through the state. So we are going to be able to have a beautiful memorial plaque out there that will honor both the people who have been there, but also the families. We'll do new fencing and actually give it a facelift, something that will be befitting and honoring. And I also received a call from the renowned artist, Jay Bowen, who has done some really beautiful work, and his work is really well known. And he is wanting to do something out there, some sort of a artistic piece, a statue, something that will also be honoring and befitting. So I'm going to be working forward with him on that, and also probably going out for some grants. I'll be kind of looking to the city maybe, or looking to other resources where we can do that. So it's kind of exciting to see how we do honor the past and honor those who have come before us. And yeah, it was a very memorable and an emotional weekend, and it was really lovely and beautiful that we were able to do this as a community and that we care as a community. Okay, with that said, we do not have any proclamations tonight. I am going to move on to, it's actually a motion, public hearing motion. Bill Bullock has put together a request, a motion to set public hearing for June 11th, 2025, and he wants to present the 2026-2031 six-year Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, and solicit public comment relevant to the adoption of the TIP by the City Council, which is scheduled to be voted on by them on June 25th, 2025. So, Council, he is just looking for a motion
I'll
to
make that
do that.
motion.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Councilman Henderson and a second by Councilman Burns to approve the motion to have a hearing June 11th, where Director Bullock will be able to do the presentation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And Director Bullock, did you want to add any comments, or you have anything further you'd like to add to this?
Not really. I like to have the public hearing starting, so there's two different iterations or two different readings of the six-year TIP, and having the public hearing start at the first reading gives council the opportunity to continue the hearing if they think there's going to be more comment or something in more detail in the second hearing before we adopt the TIP.
Okay. Thank you very much. And then moving on to public comment. It is 6:41, and I invite the public to come forward and provide public comment. We ask that you keep it to 3 minutes and give your name. And if you could just maybe how you're affiliated with Sedro-Woolley. So at this point, I have Elizabeth Friedel. Am I saying your name correctly? Did I say your name correctly? I apologize if I didn't. Friedel, thank you.
I didn't write anything out because this is kind of sudden, but as amazing as,
Elizabeth, I just want to say one thing. Is the blue light on?
yes.
Perfect. Okay, because I want to make sure that what you say is heard
Okay.
and recorded. And if you could give your name and how
I'm
you're.
Elizabeth Friedel. I'm a resident.
Okay.
I've lived here my entire life. My husband and I own 1020 Wicker Road, which is directly next to Family Promise and next to the Lutheran Church. As amazing as Family Promise is and how happy I am they are to get people going, no one is talking about the negative impact of the neighbors who live next to Family Promise. I can just give you a few examples of things that have happened when Family Promise came in. We were having a family barbecue and a woman proceeded to try to run over her boyfriend. Our friends witnessed someone from Family Promise running around our house with a gun. Yelling, screaming, and not to mention, from what we have found out, is that Family Promise wants to build 15 homes over at the Methodist Church, and I can only imagine that they also want to do the same thing in my backyard, basically, which bumps directly up to where the parsonage is. That will negatively impact my home value. So I'm not in favor of that happening if that were to move forward. If I were even to try to sell my house, who's gonna want to buy my house with 15 small tiny homes random people living in my backyard? So I'm just here to bring light to the council that it's not always a positive. Like, neighborhoods are being affected by this. As positive as it may seem for everyone else that she's presenting these great numbers, there are still a lot of negatives. My sister-in-law couldn't be here. She lives across the street. They had a little girl that was wandering out to the street on a regular basis. They took her back to Family Promise multiple times. No adults were letting her in the house. They opened the door and let her in. So there are things that we have to deal with as neighbors in our community, that's not always great. So I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but there are a lot of other issues besides these great numbers that she's presenting. So I guess that's all I want to say, and thank you.
All right. Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, I have Judy Lemley.
Okay. I have one little question that doesn't pertain to Family Promise First. The
And
reader,
a little bit of business here. I just need you to give your name. and-
oh, Judy
Okay.
Lemley.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes. I'm curious about the reader board sign on Moore Street, right before the roundabout. You're going 35 miles an hour. I get to read maybe one sentence. It's right there at the park, you know, on the side of the road. Is there any other place that sign could be put? That's just my one little thing. The other thing is Family Promise. We too live on the other side of the Lutheran church yard. Our fence is right up to where they mow. And the Family Promise two-story house is right there behind us. There's people on the roof. There's police there. There's yelling. There's screaming. And last summer and fall, there were 13 people in there, 7 kids and 6 adults. And now we got a letter from the city, and they are building 14 houses behind the Methodist church on that little tiny property, which borders our place also. Now, they didn't notify us until this map was already drawn up. So why haven't we been notified about the Lutheran church going to sell part of the property that borders our house? I don't know. And how big is this area that the Lutheran church is going to sell? How do we find this out? I went to the planning department here. They gave me this map. I asked them how many square feet, because some of the houses are small, some are big. They could not tell me how many square feet were in these houses. Now, why? Something's wrong. And so 14 houses in this little square behind the Methodist church. There's already 5, 6 cars parked in that little parking spot behind the Methodist church because of the 4 houses that go alongside the Methodist church. So where are 14 houses, and there's no limit to how many people they said can be in each house? Where are they going to park? They told me that there's going to be a gate, and they could park over in the Lutheran church parking lot, and they could walk through the rain, the snow, the ice, all through the park behind and into the Methodist church. Sounds great. But that's all. But I wish that we would have been able to ask this person that was here some questions. Because, I mean, how big is the area where this parsonage-built house is? How big an area is that belongs to that house in the back of that church? I mean, is it half an acre, 1/4 of an acre? We don't know. And we didn't get a letter from the city about the Methodist church until after they had it all designed out. Just like we didn't get a letter about the Lutheran church going to sell anything. And so I have another question, sorry. When they sell this property, the churches pay no property taxes, right? So when they sell the property, who pays the property taxes? Anybody? No? Don't know? Well, you can't, no one knows, or you just can't tell me?
It's a public
Oh, you
comment.
can't talk. Oh, sorry. Alrighty.
I'm sorry.
up now.
It's not that we're not listening. We are, believe me, we are. Yep. Okay, thank you, Judy. And then Lynn Combs?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Lynn Kalmus, and I'm a resident of Sedro-Woolley in the state of Washington. My home is bordered by the Lutheran church to the east of me, and by the Methodist church on the north of me. So, of course, when I received the letter, I was quite upset and wondering what was going to transpire. And what had transpired, did the Methodist church sell the property already to Family Promise? So I would just like to reiterate what Judy, who is my neighbor right next door. I live at 1028 Jeanette Street, and I think I'm affected by this on two borders of my home. And I'd like to be notified and be able to speak my piece. And I do feel that whatever happens, the properties have to be surveyed, and security has to be put in place, and whatever else needs to be done. And how soon is this going to take effect? So I lost my husband 2 years ago, and I reside here in Sedro-Woolley in my home by myself. So I feel that I should be entitled to some type of security that should be provided. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Lynn. Okay. Is there anyone else who'd like to give public comment? Okay. Hearing none, it is 6:52. I will close public comment, and we do hear you. We do. So, but thank you for coming in, sharing your concerns. Moving on then to unfinished business. The first that we have on the list is the 2025 Budget Amendment Number 1, Ordinance 209825, and this is a second read. Kelly's looking for a motion to approve. So, Kelly, would you like to take over here?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. So the city passed the 2025-2026 biennial budget in November of 2024. Again, this is a routine amendment for fiscal year 2025. We did a first read and public hearing on May 14th at the last council meeting. There's been no changes since the last reading. We did include some information that was also included in the last packet of some of the summary of the changes from the original budget to this amendment. The first one was the revenue in the general fund, the repayment of a 2024 loan. Also, we've added an HR position, also an IT position, or excuse me, I should say amended the HR position, added an IT position, added a police officer, and included the estimated impacts of police labor negotiations. And then the final larger item is Olmsted Park. At a previous council meeting, alternative bids 1 and 2 were approved to use the general fund reserve for those amounts. Similar to last meeting, we also included a table of some of the one-time costs included in the budget. And then finally, we wanted to touch on the financial reserve. This is the 2024 actual, since that year is closed out, and the 2025 projected based on the proposed budget in this amendment. So we take the total expenditures in the general fund and divide it by take the cash and divide it by the expenditures of ending cash. So for 2024, we're at 34%, which is a healthy financial reserve in the general fund. The city's financial policy is 12%, so we are meeting that reserve policy. One thing we talked about in the committee is in the next couple committee meetings, bringing back what we want our policy to be. The staff will likely recommend policy greater than 12%, but likely still under what our current was 34%. So wanted to give that context. We've included as attachments the ordinance as well as the summary document of what was changed from the original budget. We've also included the authorized FTE count and then the line item of the budget.
Okay. Any questions for Kelly? Yes, go ahead, Councilwoman Diamond.
I'm guessing that this remained the same because there was no actual motion set to remove specific items from the budget. But the last meeting we had, I specifically had mentioned that I was not in favor of the $15,000 for an office space in finance. I didn't deem that to be a necessary cost. And also, I had mentioned that I did not deem it financially necessary or cost-effective at the moment for an additional 1.0 of an IT person. I think that, I mean, if that is still wanting to be pursued, there were a very lengthy discussion in our committee meeting, and I think that would, and it just brought up more and more questions, to be honest. And so I think, in my opinion, that should not be in the amendment here and could be tabled for the next year's budget and further discussion. But those would be my two very specific items I would like to see removed or cut from the budget, and I would be willing to make a motion for one or both of those if that's necessary.
That's what you need to do. Yes,
So-
go ahead, Councilwoman Kesty.
I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and remove the one-time expenditure of the $15,000 for the office space in finance. And then separately, do you want to do that? Do you need one motion or two?
We-
Do you want them
How do
both?
you want to do it? Because of
I can do one each, that way they're separate, because
Okay.
one's an expenditure and one's a,
I'll second that first motion.
okay. This expenditure. So you want to make a motion to remove it at this time?
correct.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table right now to remove from the 2025 budget amendment the 15,000 office space. I don't have the full, where I lost it here, for the office space, I'll just say that. So we have a motion by Councilwoman Diamond, seconded by Councilman Henderson, correct? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, well, no,
Aye.
That was my bad, yeah, the discussion.
yeah, I wanted to say something, so.
Why don't you go ahead and say it?
Okay, so first of all, on the office space, I just had a question. I worked in a lot of newsrooms, and we just use partitions. Why isn't that? It seems like that'd be a lot cheaper, just throwing that idea out there.
That's exactly what's there, and they want to build walls all the way up.
Oh, I see,
Yeah.
okay, well, and why are the walls needed?
We would locate it somewhere else, not put walls up in the main space. We still want it to be open and inviting. So we would put it somewhere different than where the cubicle is currently.
For what purpose?
One, for noise. We have several people walking through our department. So noise, distraction are the main elements of wanting a more enclosed office space.
I had one other just observation on the IT. I was thinking maybe AI would help us not need as many people. I talked to my relative who's been doing cyber IT for 15 years in San Francisco, and he said I'm wrong. He said actually AI makes more of a threat for cyber threats, that they can break through systems. And he told me, he said one bad hack will make the cost of an IT professional 5-10 times worth it. So I'm in favor of an IT person. I think it's a high risk for the city, and with a lot of small cities getting nailed with ransomware, I just think we should be careful.
Joe?
Thank you. Just for I'll stick to what's up right now, the office. So that wouldn't be for security of files or anything like that, that you'd be building that for privacy for that individual doing the job?
No,
Okay,
not for
thank you.
files.
Okay. All right. So the other item.
Excuse me, Mayor. Mayor, I'm sorry, just for the minutes, I wasn't sure how everybody voted. Was it yes across the?
Okay. Actually, we did vote. Yeah, we did. So I can go through everybody who was in favor of the motion. Please raise your hand so that Kelly may know. Okay, so it looks like there are 4 that are for it and 2 opposed.
Though it's awkward for me because I am actually opposed to the office part. I'm for.
Well, that's all we voted. That's all we voted on.
Oh, okay, well
Yeah.
then I'm opposed to that.
Okay, and
You could put me as opposed too. I hadn't decided yet because I wanted to know about the security. So I did not vote yet originally, but yeah, if it's not for security,
so it looks
I'm
like it
okay
was
with passing.
unanimous. That motion was unanimous. Well, that was sure a muddle, wasn't it? So then moving on, you said that you had a second motion that you would like to put forward.
Yes, I'd like to cut the IT 1.0 FTE Workstation Support Specialist for this amendment, and you're welcome to bring it back for the 2026 budget.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, so again, we have a motion by Councilwoman Diamond, seconded by Councilman Henderson to pull the IT 1.0 FTE IT Workspace Support Specialist. Okay, any discussion?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Councilman Burns.
I have serious concerns about short staffing our IT department, and after the conversation we had tonight, I'm not less concerned about where we're going. I do not trust outsourcing very much and am very skeptical of outsourcing our core duties. So I want to make sure that we are prepared for the types of threats that Councilman Koch talked about, because if someone ransoms the information that we have, that can become very costly for the city. We have a lot of people's personal information that we do not want released on our behalf, or because we made a mistake, because we were cheap, didn't do our diligence. So I'm willing to go along with this for the moment, but I really want us to have a serious discussion about making sure that we are covering the city and having staff in-house that is going to be able to handle that.
Okay. And then Councilman Koch, did you have anything else you'd like to say about that?
I guess the only other thing to add is that I didn't sit through the discussion of the committee, so there's probably stuff I don't know about that was brought up. And even though I strongly believe in a very good and effective IT staff, I'm willing to pause it until the next next budget, so we can have more discussion about it. But I think it's very important, and I do worry in the interim if we get hacked.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, so we have a motion on the table by Councilwoman Diamond, second by Councilman Henderson, to currently pull the IT additional 1.0 FTE IT workstation support specialist, with the caveat that we just pause it for now and bring it back in the next budget amendment, or the next budget, whichever comes first. Is that correct?
Correct, further discussion.
Okay. All right. So any more discussion on this? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. None opposed. All right, so then looking at the budget as is, minus the office dividers and the IT specialist, is there anything else that council wishes to discuss or pull forward? Yes, go ahead, Councilwoman Kesty.
Thank you. I would like to discuss the HR. Did you, within this, say what you were cutting in order to carry this on?
Yes, we presented in the last meeting. Let me flip back to that meeting. So we made several cuts in expenditures from the last meeting. Basically, the net impact of those cuts, besides some of the one-time costs, resulted in a decrease of total expenditures by about $4,000. Some of the biggest changes, were reevaluation of the calculations for salaries and benefits. We also removed professional service line item for our ambulance billing, some training. Let's see, removed some of the ancillary items around HR, some of the services and training budgets there. We had some savings for overtime as well, being able to reduce some of those costs in some areas.
And so for HR, are you guys outsourcing anything? Did you outsource anything for HR?
We're funding the core duties with one position, and then beyond that, we'll look at outsourcing as we need to. It's certainly a discussion we had with council at a prior meeting about the possibility of looking at outsourcing for certain types of projects. For example, when we did the classification and compensation study, that was one thing that's very appropriate to outsource.
I mean, I'm sorry, maybe it wasn't very clear. Did you outsource anything when you had your part-time person?
Nothing beyond what we had previously outsourced.
Okay. I will not be in favor of a full-time HR, but everything else that is left, I would be okay with. So I guess I'd put a motion out for that just because then I would know, I won't be, if it's within it, then I'm not going to be voting for it as a whole. If it's pulled, then I will approve everything else. So I guess I will make a motion to remove what you're asking for the HR.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Councilwoman Diamond.
Is any of the first responders onboarding or any of that stuff being outsourced currently for HR purposes? And if a new HR person is hired, is that going to continue to be outsourced, or is that completely, how is that going to be handled?
Currently, we're not outsourcing anything as far as onboarding. Right now, we do have a personal services agreement with a gal doing our civil service commission, and that's the only thing we're doing. And right now, as well as that's working, we would like to continue with that process to take care of those civil service commissioners at their request, because it's actually running very smoothly and very cost effectively right now.
And my apologies on that. That was an omission that I forgot to mention. So, yep, that part we did outsource. We made that decision at the very end of the HR analyst tenure with us.
Okay. I saw some lights on down here. Do you still want to make comment?
Yeah, on something else.
Oh, Councilman Burns? Oh, sorry.
You know, I was shocked that we didn't have an HR person on when I became a council member, and I think this is wildly irresponsible to not have one. So I am strongly in favor of having an in-house HR person who will handle the issues that come before the city, that can make sure that we are following the letter of the law and our rules, and can effectively and quickly respond to problems. So I am extremely opposed to removing this yet again from the budget.
Okay. Councilman Cock?
I think Councilman Henderson was before me.
I run the meeting, so.
Oh, okay, all right, sorry. I've made this comment previously, that we heard from the department heads that the part-time HR position did not work. It created a lot of problems. It increased risk for the city. And I think going forward without a full-time HR person is just inviting a higher level of risk and a higher possibility of liability. I'm all for it. Again, as I said in a previous meeting, finding the right HR person, they're worth their weight in gold. They solve problems across the city. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilman Henderson?
Yep, thank you. So I hear what you guys are saying, right? And, you know, we can, it's not our job to decide what the city does and doesn't need. It's the administration and the staff. They give us their recommendations, but then it becomes, we have the onus of figuring out how we're gonna pay for it.
We did that for you.
Did you? Okay, so so adding this, what we did ask for in our last meeting was we wanted this to be budget neutral, meaning what are we gonna cut? And what we just heard was about $4,000 worth of stuff.
Oh, no.
It's a much, much longer list. She covered the list verbally, but she didn't cover all the numbers.
Do we have a running total?
Yeah, we had that in the last meeting.
So what we added to the budget, we took away $4,000 more than what we added, with the exception of some of those one-time things. So, you know, like the largest one-time thing was Woody still has it up there, the Olmsted Park Council made a motion and approved that being spent out of the general fund reserve. So we removed $4,000 more than we added in.
We overcut the budget.
So where did all that money come out of? Where did it all come from?
Sure, yes.
We'll go over the list again.
We can, Woody, can you maybe open up the May 14th meeting? And that list was included in the packet for May 14th. Let's see. I'm not on May 14th. Let me find the page for you. It was on page 87. If you want to, I don't know. Yeah, there you go. So these are all of the changes we have made to the budget since the original reading. So you can see we added, overall, the expenditures increased $487,000. However, a significant portion of those are the one-time costs, so that would actually be reduced. Council made a motion to remove the finance office from there. But again, the largest portion is the $350-some thousand for Olmsted Park that council approved. And then if you scroll down just a little bit, so if you remove those one-time items, the things that we did remove resulted in the budget decreasing by $4,000 over the original budget.
Where's that $193,000 of salaries coming out of?
That is throughout the general fund. There's several categories that is included there. So it's we do our best guess of salaries and benefits. We don't know exactly where we're going to land. So that is an adjusted calculation for those items.
And so this 121,000, that's the police labor negotiation projection?
That is, and it's a projection. We haven't closed that negotiation, but that is the amount above what we included in the original budget.
Okay, and then so so in the last meeting, there was 2 different positions we were able to pick from, right? And you said we have one at right around $80,000 and one at like $120,000. Right, so there's 2 different, I forget what you call them, but on your salary schedule, you have
Options.
different levels, like
Rates.
127 or whatever,
Yeah,
I
those are
think
the
was one of them.
grades.
Okay. Can we pull that up so we know what we're like talking about as far as, because if it passes to add the position, right? Well, we gotta identify what position is passing.
Right. It is included in the FTE count, but it would be the HR manager position is what we're requesting. The previous position was a half-time HR analyst. I don't think it's in the packet, but it is available on our website. Woody, do you want Woody to bring that up from our website?
Yeah, because I mean, if we're already outsourcing a lot of the civil service stuff, which is a good portion of it when we're doing that onboarding or the civil service stuff, that takes quite a bit. It's stressful, and you're dealing with a civil service commission, and we have something that's working now. Why do we need that next echelon of person to cover? Are we just talking about like completely gutting all of our current HR efforts and just replacing it with this one person?
Right, that the half-time HR analyst position would no longer be there, and that it would be replaced with a full-time HR manager. That we went out to recruit for a half-time HR analyst position, and we were unable to recruit a candidate that met the city's needs, who would be willing to work full-time, unbenefited in the analyst position.
There is a full-time position below the manager position. That's HR.
There is the council authorized the FTE at 0.5 for the HR analyst, which that is still a position in our salary grid, HR analyst. It doesn't, our salary grid doesn't specify whether it's part-time or full-time. The FTE count authorizes that.
There, in the chart you showed us at the last meeting, there was a HR manager, and then there was a full-time position that had been created that is less than what an HR manager is.
I think
Pretty
what
sure.
an HR manager is like 120 something. Yeah, it's 127.
And the HR analyst is 122.
And so that 122, that's a full-time position, because I'm seeing an assistant planner, that's a full-time position.
These positions are just positions. They don't indicate whether it's part-time or full-time. The city doesn't have very many part-time people, so almost all of these positions get filled as full-time, but it sets the wage, like the annual salary there is full-time, but the FTE count that gets included with the budget determines whether it is part-time or full-time. So the HR analyst position listed, if someone works part-time, they make the hourly rate that's listed there. They don't make the annual rate. But what grade, how it's on the pay scale doesn't indicate whether it's part-time or full-time.
Can I add something real quick? I think, Councilman, one of the things is that many of these positions on the salary grade are unfilled as permanent positions, and I think with the proposal for the HR manager, the HR analyst would be unfilled at that time. Is that correct, Charlie?
We have positions on there that are they appear blue, I think, in this version of it. And those are planned positions generally. The positions in black are generally budgeted positions that are either occupied or unoccupied, depending on any moment in time. And some of them, there are many people who occupy those positions. It's not just one. Not necessarily what you're looking at here, but if you looked at some of the other parts of the salary grid, there'd be many people in certain positions.
And they're included there because they're a part of that if we ever hired into those positions, that we've already done the work to the internal equity of like where those should lie in our salary grid. So right now they're blue because we do not have authorization and or need at this moment to have those positions approved. So if our request was fulfilled, the HR analyst position would go blue. We'd no longer have authorization for that position, and the HR manager would go black. That is the position we would fill for.
So I'm going to allow other council members that want to speak. So we will come back if you still have questions.
Thank you.
Councilman Cock?
Yes, I've worked with a lot. First of all, it's such a small, Kelly, pay difference. What's the difference between a manager and an analyst at 127?
I'll let Charlie answer that one.
I can speak to that a little bit. The manager is going to be more directly managing HR functions within the city. And really what we felt like with the HR analyst position half-time is that we were asking a half-time HR analyst to be an HR manager. That's one of the experiences we had as an organization. So we've asked for the manager this time. We've asked for full-time because we really need a full presence for HR. That doesn't mean that nobody else is going to touch HR. We all touch HR. We'll continue to touch HR, but we'll have more HR expertise in the organization. And particularly if we're going to have one position, we really need to make sure we've got a full skill set available from that position. So the HR analyst is going to handle a lot of basic HR duties and be able to do some analytical work and some of the more technical work, but can't range necessarily all the way up into the very technical work. An HR manager is going to be able to range all the way up into the very technical work, do some union work as well, but also be able to do anything else that we need, all the way down to basic functions.
Are they doing recruitment as well? I just wanted to be clear.
Yes.
So citywide recruitment.
Yep, and onboarding, there was some mention of onboarding for public safety. That would still be done by this person. The civil service piece, the recruitment piece, one of the reasons we outsourced that is we had a big backlog of candidates that we needed to work through. But it's working really well because it's such a competitive environment for public safety. We'd like to keep that going. That historically has not been a big role. We had a half-time person split job doing payroll and HR. Civil service was a part of that role, so it's kind of a part of a half-time role. It's not typically a huge amount of time, but it was a huge amount of time when we had our half-time HR analyst because we had such a backlog. So that was part of the challenge we had there.
Well, just an observation. I worked a lot with HR professionals, and they're very competitively paid, And if you want to get a good one, I'm sorry, it costs money. So I think moving forward without any HR person, certainly, like I said, the part-time, as we were all told, was, I'm not going to paraphrase, but it sounded to me like a disaster. And we need to try to avoid that situation. I think getting a good full-time HR person would alleviate a lot of the possibility for some of that stuff happening again.
Councilman Loy, you had your mic on?
Well, I've been trying to keep straight all I've read and all the changes today, but I think Charlie pretty much answered the questions I was going to ask.
And Councilwoman Diamond?
I just had a quick question here. So in going back to the budget, because as far as I'm concerned, it's not up to council to determine how you're functioning on a day-to-day within the administration, right? Like, that's never been a role here for council, but it is our job to ensure that there is proper budget in order to fund it. And as I stated before in the last meeting, as long as this is budget neutral, I'm not opposed to the full-time HR. However, I did have a question about the budget, because there was the one-time loan repayment of the $541,320. Is that part of what is being included in this? Because in my opinion, repayment of a loan shouldn't be funding an HR person, which is an ongoing source of income. That would be a one-time cost coverage because we have additional funds now available.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it is not included in balancing the budget.
Okay.
It's included in the budget because the revenue will be coming in. But it was not taken into consideration in reviewing for the HR.
Okay, because in the past, when we've talked about adding full-time employees, we have to look at the longevity of that and how sustainable the position is. And so we need to ensure that we've got kind of a 5-10-year lookout on our budget, and that is in fact sustainable. So I just want to make sure that, as long as the budget is sustainable there and there's no impact, we've been able to cut from other areas in order to make that happen, and that there's no additional costs to the taxpayers in this additional funding.
That is correct.
Okay.
So, Councilman Burns, do you have?
Yes, I was going to say that it appears that the city staff has shown that they have made this budget neutral and done what the council requested of them at the last meeting. I would like to make a motion to approve the budget amendment with the HR manager position.
We do have a motion. It wasn't seconded, but we already have a motion by Councilwoman Kesty to remove the HR.
It wasn't seconded, so
No.
at what point does it motion die if it's not seconded?
Yeah, I think you'd have to finish it. Is that correct?
Mayor, I'd recommend asking for a second.
So is there a second? Okay, hearing no second, that motion dies, and we will move on to your motion, Councilman Burns, which is a motion to...
Approve
Okay.
with the HR manager.
Okay. Is there a second with that?
I'll second.
Okay. So we have a motion by Councilman Burns, seconded by Councilman Koch, to approve the budget 2025, budget number 1, ordinance number 209825, with the HR motion, including the HR position. Any more discussion? I see you have your light on.
Yeah, so I'm still not understanding why we need to make it the much more expensive by $20,000 a year starting manager than the analyst. We're still showing, yeah, budget neutral, right? But you're talking about paying somebody, an extra 20 grand a year starting out right away. And if we're honestly, we're just trying to cut union people out of doing HR work, we're already outsourcing the Civil Service Commission stuff. Why are we going for the high one? I still don't understand why we're doing that, because Charlie, you're still managing, right? And HR is like still a function of your job, so I'd consider you to be the manager.
May I speak to that? Because I work directly with Charlie, and I know we meet every day, and I can tell you that Charlie, yes, his job does include HR duties, and a city administrator will always have HR duties. That's part of the function, as part of the job. What's happened here is that he's playing two completely different roles. He is both the city administrator and he is doing full-time HR work. It's not possible, and I see him burning out. In all fairness, it's true. It's just, he cannot stay on top of everything that is requested and required by the position, and then do everything that is requested and required by the HR position. And I don't think that that is fair. And going back to a point that, concerned me many months ago when we first had this discussion, is that we're the only organization of our size that does not have an HR person, and we are vulnerable. It keeps us completely vulnerable. And, out of our duty to our citizens, we should be protecting them, protecting the city from any kind of lawsuit. And also, I just think it's cruel having to have somebody play both those roles. And I don't know if you want to add to that, Charlie, but I just see you, he was here at 5:30 in the morning one morning. I come in early. I'm here between 6:37, and, put in more than 8 hours a day, that's for sure.
I think we've talked at length before about it, but there's some things in those two roles that come in conflict at times, and you can't do either role appropriately. You have to let one role either trump the other, and it's usually HR trumping administration. And that's tough because the city then doesn't benefit from the management it could have.
We also have to bring in our attorney at that point too, because if Charlie can't do the role, then we have to bring in our attorney, which means we have to pay her to do a job that we could have an HR person do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit in the past as well about union employees doing confidential HR work, and there's a direct conflict there, and that is an issue. And so this is not in any way an attempt to take work away from a union. The union has actually agreed to this move and is supportive of it. It is simply an attempt to make sure that we manage liability in the city and that we do HR at an appropriate level for the size of our organization. So that's where the nature of our recommendation comes from.
Well, I think you missed the entire point I was trying to make, is we hire a full-time HR analyst at the 120, 122 pay scale instead of the 127, right? You're still the boss of that person, right? But if we hire an HR manager, you're still the boss of them too, right? Yes. And who are they the boss of as a manager?
Well, I think it equates to, Charlie is my boss as the finance director, but that I have more expertise in the financial part. So, that will hold true for an HR manager, that they will be the expertise in HR. They've had the training, the background, and the experience as an HR manager. And when we went to recruit for this position, we really came across the fact that like Charlie mentioned, we're asking someone to be the HR manager, but doing the HR analyst work. So it's just correctly classifying the work that we're doing. What we don't have in our budget or in our salary schedule is like an HR director, that the HR director, there would be nobody working under that position. So we felt like we didn't need to rise it to that level, but that HR manager was appropriate. We do have a job description here, the job description that is put out.
I don't know if it was this sent out to the council at all at one point. I thought it was, especially when we had the first discussion regarding HR.
Yes, we did send it out
But
previously.
this will actually tell you what the position is about and, you know,
Can we pull it up?
yeah. Do you have it, Woody? Do you have the job description for the human resource manager? It was
If
updated
it's
in,
online, I should be able to find it.
it was updated in January of '24. My experience has been the difference between an HR manager and an HR analyst is that many, many times the manager has far and away more education and experience than an analyst does. And given that we're only going out for one position, I think we would want to have somebody who is going, as Paul has pointed out, somebody who's going to give us the very best of what we require and need.
I'm not able to locate that right now.
Okay. Okay. It's very lengthy. I'm not sure that I really want to read it. But, I mean, even the knowledge and the skill that's involved, the abilities that are involved, I have, you know, what do I have? 4 pages here of requirements and what we're looking for. So it's not just a simple application. It's somebody that will have to be able to do the job and do it well. And it is a matter of safety for the city. It really is a matter of safety for the city and for the citizens.
Well, the city identified the need to have a full-time HR person, right?
Right.
And basically, what we're looking at now is the difference between whether, well, I'm looking at the difference between whether it's at the salary level of 122 or 127, right? And that's still a full-time person. Now, had we been able to hire a half-time person that really worked out well and really just, you know, did the job really well, we wouldn't be probably having this conversation. But it's harder to find a person at halftime, I understand that, with no benefits, even at a 0.75. Those are hard to find unless it's like somebody who really doesn't want to work that much. I get it, but what I'm simply pointing out is that if we get if you guys are able to hire a full-time, well, let's just call it an HR person. Let's call it a generalist because I've never heard of a HR analyst before. So we're basically deciding at this point, passing this motion, whether or not we want the highly paid person at that next salary level, or if a full-time HR analyst would have worked all along.
Do a range.
Well, the recommendation we've made in the budget amendment is for an HR manager position. So that's the motion that you have before you. If the council were to vote for that, then you would be approving an HR manager position.
Well, I'm inclined to not vote for it, but I would be more inclined to vote for it if it were the salary range 122, not 127. So that's where I'm at. I mean, that's a very highly paid position starting out, much higher than a lot of people, you know, that are out there.
The council did approve the salary schedule, so it would take a separate action if you wanted to hire an HR manager at the 122. You'd have to change the salary schedule.
I think he means an HR analyst at 122.
Yeah,
unless I'm
I'm talking about a full-time HR person that's all they do is HR stuff, right? And that's kind of what this whole conversation over the last year has been about, is you guys wanted somebody full-time. We tried something else that I guess it did not work. And so now we're asking for full-time, but now we're looking at a salary range of 127 and 122. I'm saying if we're gonna go for it full-time, let's go for the 122 at that lower salary range. There's still a full-time person that's gonna start out making more than I do, and I've been at my job for 7 years, right? So that's kind of where I'm at on this, because you're still going to have oversight, Charlie, and you have a lot of experience, right? You're not going to have to be there in the trenches doing all the work this whole time, but you're going to be able to, have that managerial oversight over this employee. I get it if,
But he still will be doing some of the work.
some of the work, but that's still part of the job description that Charlie's
And I know
currently in.
I know this is hard to swallow, but if you were to go through, I've sat on several hiring committees regarding HR, and I can tell you that this is the going range. This is what they do get paid, and if we want to bring in, we want to be successful at this. We don't want to say that we're going to buy a few $1,000s, not get the best and the qualifications that we need, only to have it be a headache or a mistake.
The first person still tops out at a six-figure salary, that's good money.
You know,
I'm inclined to not pass this motion and go for the lower one instead. And we gave you a halftime. It didn't work out, largely because you struggled to find somebody who was going to work without benefits and who wasn't going to work full-time. We had a lot of applicants, and then they found out it wasn't a full-time job, and then they were like, well, no. So.
Madam Mayor,
yes.
all due respect to Councilmember Henderson, I doubt he had to get a bachelor's degree to do his job. And an HR manager does. An HR manager will have to come with some experience and a resume that shows they know what they're doing. And if we want someone who's competent to do this job, I mean, we already set the city up for failure with a part-time HR analyst that did not work out and caused a lot of problems for most especially the police and fire departments, to where they had to outsource in order to actually be able to do their jobs. So what I'm hearing is that instead of doing the thing that we need to do for the city to get somebody who is experienced and going to know what to do when there's a problem, instead we're just going to hire an entry-level person to try to figure it out. That's what I'm hearing when you say that you want to hire an HR analyst. I want to hire somebody who's experienced. I want to get that person who's worth their weight in gold, who actually knows what they're doing, who has dealt with problems before, who has worked for other people and managed other people, who actually will think through the consequences of their actions beyond just their degree, but with their experience. Because when you pay someone more, when you have to hire somebody at a higher level, you are also asking for that extra experience that comes from having done the job before. If you already had an HR manager and you wanted to hire somebody else, sure, you can get somebody who's green, because they can turn around, go to the manager and say, hey, I got this situation, what should I do? How do we not get sued? They can't do that when they don't have someone experienced to back them up. So I'm really not in favor of hiring just the newest person we can get who just got out of college last year. That's my thought when I'm looking at these positions. We have really left the city in a lurch for a while with this part-time position, and now we're looking to do it again.
Can I add something, or somebody before me?
Go ahead.
I mean, I think you'll get better candidates, quite frankly, with the manager as opposed to analysts, because people don't want to step down, say they're already a manager or director, they don't want to step down. However, how hard, just following it up on Councilman Henderson's point, how hard would it be to hire the HR manager at the lower rate? I mean, would we just have to take a vote on it? Because I'm okay with that. It's still a well-paid position.
I mean, typically we have discretion to hire within the range. That said, we typically don't hire above the midpoint, so.
That's what was budgeted for, correct?
Budgeted at, I believe, 4.
It's budgeted at step 4 of the HR manager grade.
What would a lower step be?
Woody, can you bring that up again if you still have it?
Because, to an applicant, steps are arbitrary, quite frankly.
Right. So it's the difference of about $10,000.
For what step? I can't see that.
Step 4 to step 1 is the difference of about $10,000.
Well, why don't we split the difference and hire them at step 1?
I'm sorry, you were budgeted where on 127, step 5?
Step 4. We also, when we also budget not knowing who we're going to hire. So we budget at someone to have themselves, their spouse, and 2 children, 2 dependents. So that's a factor there. We always budget on the higher end, not knowing who we're going to hire, and that's same idea here. We don't know who we're going to hire, so we put it at step 4 as just a reasonable guess.
A mid-range.
In the range, yeah.
Councilwoman Kesty, did you?
Yes, thank you very much. I just had one last comment. I take great offense that we would be putting a vote that would make our police or fire in any sort of predicament. And knowing what we had before, the reason why I am not for it is because we did have a part-time available. Whether or not that particular candidate worked out for whatever reason, that's on them. That is not on us. And we are already outsourcing for the police and fire what they were doing. Charlie has his position and what it is doing. I think it's fiscally responsible to work within and live within your means, and that's why I will not be supporting it. I don't care if you do the higher one, the lower one, that's irrelevant because I feel that you're not being fiscally responsible with what we have currently now, and that we need to start living within our means and doing things the Woolley way, where we all work really hard, we're all putting in long hours, and we save the taxpayers money.
So I guess my response to that is I agree that we all need to give, 100%. I really do. I do think, though, it's wrong of any employer to expect somebody to do 2 full-time jobs. I don't see where that's responsible. And I do credit Kelly for coming up with something that is fiscally responsible. We are able to do this. It is within our means to be able to hire an HR person. And going back to the citizens, they put us in these chairs, and we have a responsibility to make sure that we're taking care of our citizens, and that means taking care of what happens here at City Hall. We want to do the best job possible, and I don't think they want to see us sued because we didn't do what we know is the right thing to do, which is what every other business as well as agency as well as governance within the same range as we are, the same population that we are, they've hired a couple of HR persons or 1.5. Some even have 3. We sit with none. And I know you all heard some of the great concerns that have happened here. And we shared that with you because we want you to be aware of what the public is being exposed to. It is their money. When we are sued, it is their money that is being paid out. This is important. It's very important, and we're just asking that we all do the right thing. I don't know if anybody else has any other comment. If not, we have a motion. A motion by Councilman Burns, second by Councilman Koch, to approve the 2025 budget amendment number 1, ordinance number 209825, with approval of the HR manager. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So may I see show of hands? Because
I'm confirming, though, that this does not include the IT and the one-time
$15,000 office space.
Right, we can do that. We've already asked them to be removed, we made a motion, but sure, we can do that. So let me amend the motion, and that is to approve the 2025 budget amendment number 1, ordinance 2098-25, approving the HR manager, but having omitted already by motion the IT specialist and the workstation in finance.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. And I'll do it by show of hands again. All those in favor signify by holding up your hand. So we have 3, and opposed, same sign. Okay. So we have a split. We have 3-3. And I do not think I can vote on this.
Can we table it for next
Yeah,
session?
that's an Emily Gildner's online.
Emily, so when we have a split like this, how does it roll?
Yes, so, hold on one second. I don't believe since this is the budget amendment, so I don't believe that this falls within your purview, Mayor, but
I don't think so either.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Emily.
Okay. Sorry, I was getting some weird feedback. Yeah. So in that case, then the motion would fail.
Okay. All right.
Can I make another motion?
Yes.
I prefer the manager, but I'd like to make a motion with all that stuff, the IT gone and the $15,000 office gone, and approve the HR full-time analyst position.
Okay. All right. So Emily, we can do that, right? That motion?
Yeah,
is-
you can certainly make a separate motion to amend that, and yeah, I just confirmed this because this is a ordinance amending the budget. That is not something that you can tie break vote, so
Right.
A new motion would be needed.
Okay. So, and the motion was given, and did you hear it? Councilman Cock made a motion to approve the 2025 budget, but we would omit the IT specialist and also the finance cubicle, but we would make it a HR analyst.
Yeah, that's an appropriate motion for council to vote on at this point.
Okay. So, given that, is there a second? Okay. Hearing none, then both motions fail. So, but can there be a motion to approve the budget minus all 3 of those?
I believe so. I don't see why not.
Yes, there can.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So then I'm looking for a motion to approve the budget minus the HR manager and the IT specialist, as well as the workstation.
Madam Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Do I-
I'll second that, and also with the stipulation that the whole HR, whether it's analyst or manager, is out now after Paul's, because that's not gonna get voted through either, I guess, based on the last one.
No,
didn't get
yeah,
a
the
second.
motion is just for the budget minus all 3 of those.
Okay, I'll
Yeah,
second that.
Yeah.
Could you restate the motion?
Yes, I was just going to do that. So we have a motion by Councilwoman Diamond, second by Councilman Henderson, to approve the 2025 budget amendment number 1, ordinance 209825, with the stipulation that we are going to pull from this budget the HR manager, the IT specialist, and the workstation. Okay? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I only heard 2. Was that 2?
We're passing the budget minus those 3 things.
Right.
that we didn't
Right.
want.
Well, and my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is
Okay.
because the first HR failed, a second one then failed again.
motion
so we
failed.
So we have no choice then but to move forward to pass this now without the HR.
that was the motion.
HR could come back again at another point
Yes, it's, because it's not in this budget. It won't be in this budget, but it can come back in the.
as another amendment
Right.
at a different time.
Right.
Is there a time restriction on this being passed?
Is there, I'm sorry.
A time restriction on it being passed?
On this motion being passed?
Well, not the motion, but the budget amendment.
So Kelly, this is stuff that you need to have passed in order to move forward, correct? Because you've made some amendments and some changes to the budget.
We would like the items to be passed so we can move forward on some of the things, you know, like some of the items, although like the Olmsted Park, we're kind of midway through that. Like there was a motion to use the reserve, but that the budget in the Parks Fund isn't there. So we probably have enough budget in the Parks Fund to cover what we have spent so far in the year, but in some of these areas, we would need a budget approval to move forward. It's not critical that it has to happen tonight.
Well, we already have a motion put forward, so they have to vote one way or the other.
So just to clarify then.
And we did get a partial vote already, yeah.
Just to clarify then, so if none of this stuff is strictly on a timeline, and it was determined to go ahead and not approve the budget, but then this whole thing could be brought back at the next council meeting with full council available to vote, would that be, is that in fact what can happen?
Yeah.
That can happen.
Yeah. Are you talking about, though, minus the things you've already removed?
No, the two things that have already been unanimously removed. I'm
Three
talking
things,
about leaving the HR, because the HR position was split on the first vote.
It
And then
failed,
It failed
Yeah.
because of a split, but it was a 50-50 split, 3 and 3. And then the next time, there just was no second, because there was just not much of a difference. So my question then is that if they're, you know, with the last council member being at large, speaking for looking at the big picture, the majority of the city of Sedro-Woolley and its constituents, is that something that should be or could be brought back at the next council meeting, so we have a full 7 on council to go ahead and have this discussion? Or does this stuff need to be approved separately, and then the HR position can come back again at that, so that you can still move forward in this? That's my question.
Yeah, I think that would be the most simplified, to bring it back, simply because we're right in the middle of a vote, because I already called for the vote. Got part of the answer I didn't get, though. I got the yeas, I don't know who are the nays yet, so, but we can bring it back.
I was just trying to
Both
clarify before I
options are possible.
voted.
Yeah, all options are possible.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I didn't,
I think, yeah.
I think I only heard 2. So, and so the question is, all those in favor, hold up your hand so I can just see who. Okay, that's easiest. So we have 2.
Could you repeat the motion? 'Cause
Yes, I can repeat the motion. The motion is to approve the budget, the 2025 budget, amendment number 1. And this is ordinance 209825, minus the HR manager, the IT workstation support specialist, and the finance office. I've said it so many times, you think I would know. That is the motion.
I think I have it.
Okay, okay.
Raising your hand.
And this
Okay.
is,
So the question was, all those in favor of approving the budget minus those 3 items, raise your hand.
so
3.
my question before I vote,
Yeah.
though, is that the HR position can come back to be discussed as a full council.
Yes, anything is possible. Kelly just said that. Yeah, so,
We can approve.
But we can improve this, as we just stated, so that the city can still move forward with the parks and the other projects that are needing that funding for this adjustment.
right,
Correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure that stuff was not being held up.
okay. All right, thank you, thank you. So All those in favor, once again, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 5. Okay, so we have 4. Those opposed? 2. So we have 4 to 2.
Can I
So
just restate, I'm opposed to the
motion carries.
office thing.
Yeah, it's gone.
It's gone.
It's gone. Thank God it's gone. Gone. Okay. Thank you, everybody. That was fun, actually. So we're moving on actually to the second item in unfinished business, and that has to do with the amendment to Title 17 of the Sedro-Woolley Municipal Code, off-street parking and loading. It's ordinance number 209625, and thank you, Ashton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yep.
Thank you, council members. So I'm going to try to keep this introduction brief, and then we can delve into the details in a little bit. So this was last presented to the City Council for a first read on April 9th. The feedback was received well, as from what I understood. I didn't get too many comments from City Council at that meeting. But just some of the background about why we're amending the parking code in the zoning title is, I like to call them, we have 4 drivers for this. The first one is going to be City Council. City Council has, identified a lack of residential parking, in particular for our multifamily developments. We're seeing a lot of parking spreading out into the streets and the public right-of-way. And so there's some concern with there that as, these families, as the price of housing is rising and our families are residing in apartments and smaller units more frequently, there's concern that parking isn't sufficient at those units. The second driver, I like to call it, is the citizens of Sedro-Woolley. We've received several complaints of the Community Development Department that there's a lack of visitor parking at multifamily complexes, as well as the same excessive right-of-way parking that we've heard from the City Council. The third driver, as I like to call it, is the Planning Commission. Planning Commission recommended that we consolidate all of the parking regulations into one chapter just for ease of readability. We've reduced the age requirement for parking reductions for senior housing down to 55 years of age. We've added some parking reduction availabilities for certain types of developments. So those would be proximity to a transit station, construction of a parking garage or underground parking if the property permits it, as well as designating a portion of the units to be permanently affordable through a covenant. Planning Commission also recommended that we provide regulations for loading facilities for our larger 25-unit or more residential developments. So those could be in the shape of a mailroom. Could also be a loading zone near the front of the building for a mail truck or somebody moving. And then we've also added parking maximums to the Central Business District and the Urban Village Mixed-Use Overlay, because those are our areas where we see increased walkability. CBD has a lot of zero lot line buildings where parking just isn't going to be an option if we want to preserve those buildings. And then the UVMU is really geared towards shared parking, having centralized parking that several structures are being serviced by. And then the last driver is going to be down in Olympia. Washington State Legislature passed Senate Bill 6015. Department of Commerce did send us a comment letter when we were at the Planning Commission stage, and so all of their requirements that they sent to us have been addressed in the amendments. And you'll see a little RCW tagged next to each of those that you can refer to. So lastly, what's not being changed, I just want to reiterate, minimum parking requirements for commercial, industrial, public uses are all staying the same. How we enforce on-street parking and the on-street regulations themselves, those are not changing. And then the amount of parking required for accessory dwelling units is not changing. We're just adopting it into the same chapter 17.36. So that's why you'll see revisions for the ADU code. So with that, I'd love to get feedback from council members.
Okay, any questions for Ashton?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Councilman Henderson.
Thanks, Ashton. I know you worked a lot on this. Can you touch on the enforcement portion of it? I met with one of the property owners, and his main guidance to me was making sure that we had the proper enforcement procedures for the right-of-way parking that is one of the main drivers of this entire code adjustment, as well as as well as one of the other suggestions was making sure within that code that the property owners were being held accountable for the tenants' bad parking behaviors. And so can you touch on the enforcement aspect of what we're looking at a little bit deeper? Because I'm not the greatest at reading code, but
Yeah, no,
you're pretty
definitely.
good. So
So, parking enforcement on the street or in the right-of-way is definitely an issue that we've received, or it has been brought up by our developers as well, not just the citizens at the Community Development Department. One issue that we have is we don't have a person to go out and, check to make sure cars aren't parked in the fire lanes, or to check that, a car isn't blocking an alley. I would imagine, and perhaps the police chief might want to interrupt, that would fall under his purview and his department's enforcing of the on-street parking regulations. Shifting to your second question with parking violations being, the parking violation being applied to the property owner, but it's really the tenant's fault for why a parking violation is. Did I understand that second question correctly?
yeah, so the discussion that me and one of the developers had was that it's really imperative that the property management stays on top of the parking situation within their control, essentially, and to kind of make sure that it'd be a good idea that language is included, to where we go to the property owner and we're like, hey, you need to regulate your own stuff a little bit better, and it keeps everything cleaned up, because there's certain apartments that you can go to in town where they do a very, very good job of it, and then there's other ones that are managed not as well, and it'd be good to see what the people who are managing well are doing as opposed to the people who are not managing well are doing. And so we can kind of solidify that a little bit into the enforcement aspect of it, and unless there's a good way to do that.
Off the top of my head, I don't have a good way to do that. I would love to get in contact, because I have developers off the top of my mind, and I think we're speaking of the same developer when we say that some of our larger multifamily developments, their parking is enforced well, and others it's spilling into the street, if you will. At this point, I would like to get some feedback from him, and then, work something into this to bring it back to you guys at the June meeting, which is when this is scheduled to be read next. Just off the top of my head, though, I would imagine proper distribution of parking to dwelling units, because I know, for example, if you get a parking lot that has 20 spaces and there are 25 dwelling units, let's say, that would not be approved under the current code, but you could have a unit that takes up 3 parking spots, and then the person that has 1 car has to park on the street. And so I think that's not necessarily fair for the person that does have the 1 vehicle. So I believe that the landowner or the landlord does have a responsibility, or we can definitely look into that in regard to distributing or equally distributing parking spaces.
It seems as though those are some of the problems that happen in the night when everybody gets home from work, that are kind of the drivers of some of those issues. Sure. Thank you.
Councilwoman Diamond.
I was just going to piggyback on that. I've actually had various complaints, for example, over by E&E Lumber. So we've got the back 40 over there, and I get a lot of complaints of people coming and going out of E&E Lumber, but they can't, it's very difficult for them to see as they're making the left-hand turn as they're coming through, because we've got overflow parking from the apartments that are on the easement up there, right up against their business, right? And then they also have vendors and stuff coming in with semis and other larger vehicles when they're coming in to drop material, or to customers coming in to pick up materials, and that makes it very difficult for that because of the overflow parking. They didn't have those issues that disrupted their business until we had the apartments that were in there. And so I've heard from customers going in there saying that that has become a problem. I've also heard coming in and out of there. And so it's kind of like, how can that be enforced? It's overflow parking from the apartments, but like you said, if there's one person, I mean, you could have a studio and you can have one vehicle assigned to it, but you could have 2 or 3 people living in it. So how can that actually be enforced so that our businesses are not being hurt by the parking that's coming and going?
The problem with the excessive on-street public parking is that the fact that it is public and open to everybody. And the issues that are being raised by the citizens and by your constituents isn't necessarily we have people parking in the public right of way, we don't like it. It's they're in the way of something. They're in the way of getting a clear vision of the intersection. They are in the way of, providing the full thoroughfare through the road so that, you can get 2 cars going the same way. Or they're parked on the sidewalk or the curb. I think each of those have a, separate way you address each of those, and it could be separate departments as well. If you have somebody that is, if you designate parking in a vision clearance area, that's going to be building and planning, public works. Whereas if you have somebody parked in a fire lane or just parked in the road, that's not necessarily going to be our department. It's going to be public safety.
What about parking when it's on their easements? Overflow parking on their easement.
Is this
on easements?
E&E lumber?
Mm-hmm. Because it's not public parking. It's not the road, right? It's not coming down State Street. It's turned down the sides.
Like, is this
like
an easement for a utility? Is this?
I don't
okay.
know.
I don't expect you to, but
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm just wondering how enforcement, how or if kind of just piggybacking off of those questions, because those are things that have been brought up to me, and I don't, because it's certain hours of the day, right? So if the business is open at 7 o'clock in the morning and they've got trucks waiting to come in and out at 6:45, but residents are of the overflow parking are there overnight, they don't leave for work yet, there's still all of that lined up. And some of it is private easement, some of it is, it's not necessarily public parking. And so then it would go into enforcement, right? So I would assume then that the business owner would have some legal right to have those vehicles towed. However, they don't really want to create issues with permanent tenants that are, right now, nobody really wants to do those sorts of things. Everybody still wants to be a good part of the community. We just want to try to figure out how we can try to troubleshoot some of these issues as we're dealing with this, because it's like, some of the developments, some of the things that have been approved in the past, it all sounds good in theory, right? But in practice, it may not have been the best decision, because every action has reaction, sometimes 3 or 4 of them, good, bad, or indifferent. And so, it's like some of the parking issues, when Klinger Estates was approved and went through, it sounded like a great idea, but now it's like you've got to weave in and out and there's hardly any room. You've got to move over in between parked cars that are overflowing into the roadway. And you're constantly moving in and out on, high alert as you're driving through there. And at the time, it was approved, but would it be something that would be approved now? I would think maybe not, because of all of the overflow. It's not exactly conducive to what I think the whole thought process was at the time. And so I think we're kind of in that same process now, right? So the hard reality is, as much as Seattle and other areas might want us to limit the amount of vehicles that somebody has or uses, we have a lot of people here that don't necessarily work in the city of Sedro-Woolley, or they do need to commute to other places. And in order to do that, they need to have a vehicle. And so sometimes, in a 1-2 bedroom, you may have 2 or 3 vehicles, to it. And I know state law continues to change and they want to keep reducing that parking, but that does impact our roadways, our facilities, and how our first responders can access those areas.
So it sounds like, we might be halfway to the solution now. We've drafted some land use amendments to our zoning code to address, new construction, making sure our new construction and our additions and our remodels all have the proper amount of parking. And now it kind of seems like in addition to this, council may want to recommend to me to, take a look at the enforcement side of things, maybe collaborate with public safety, discuss with our code enforcement officer what her current process is, and identify gaps that we may have between the two departments' policies.
Right, because we surely don't want to have somebody build on their property and tell them that they can't have people over and they can't have those vehicles there, whatever, that's their personal property and that's their right to do so. But what we want to do is make sure that the other areas of the community aren't directly impacted, and specifically businesses and the services that are provided, especially in the higher density wards.
Did you want to make a recommendation to have him check into that with law enforcement, or?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be wonderful.
All right,
Thank you.
Councilwoman Kesty?
Thank you. I'm so glad, because I was thinking about that as well. My question's a little bit different. I think you guys did a really great job. Thank you for all the hard work on it. When there are buildings downtown and they're being turned into apartments, it's on-street parking, right? And you have people who are staying and they're not getting up for work either, but then we have the street sweeper coming through and now he can't do his due diligence because they're in the parking spots, so then it's dirty. Is there anything in there that could pertain to that as well, if you're going to be turning any of our existing buildings into apartments, what we might want to think about for street parking between the hours of bop on Wednesdays or whatever? I didn't see anything in that, and it just might be food for thought.
Yeah, I do know that, anybody can correct me if I'm wrong here, when we're regulating whether a certain side of the street is closed at a certain time of day, I don't think that goes in the zoning title, so that's why it wouldn't be in here, but we can of course expand these amendments. As for the CBD construction in the central business district, you're right, is when we don't require parking for new residential construction that are 10 units or less, but once you hit 11 units or more, they are required to provide a parking lot. So that kind of gets at your question for the street sweeping and the lack of street sweeping, because we have people, using their overnight or parking in the public right of way overnight. I think a good example is like Northern Avenue, where a certain section of the road is closed during a part of the day. I believe a section of township is between Pulte and Ferry, where you'll see the signs, no parking, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. on this day. And we have a street sweeper schedule, and we can coordinate the time that the parking is closed with that. Bill, do cars follow those signs for the street sweeper?
Sporadically.
Because on Murdoch, you're going to have that problem in the streets.
Yep.
So I would just thought.
It's a quintessential problem for every single city in the city of Washington, I would guarantee you. But yeah, it's something nobody's cracked yet.
And if we give Officer Carr or whomever is going to be our code enforcement with these other things that we're looking at, perhaps we can give her more teeth to dig into things.
Councilman Burns?
I've seen that in plenty of places. Just make sure that when you're looking at putting up those signs, that you're giving the people an option to park across the street, so that you're staggering the days and making it easy for them to follow the rules. It'll give us a greater chance of compliance, as opposed to having them tow a whole bunch of cars, which is the practice in many places. And I don't really want us to go down that path if we can avoid it, but.
And Tom?
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to be really clear. Some of this will take some work with the other departments, with Public Works and Police, and I don't want to overstep our bounds with your, what you can and cannot do. So we'll think about that. But also, Councilmember Diamond, I just wanted to be really clear. I missed part of, what is it that we're recommending Ashton go back and look at?
What the code enforcement.
With code enforcement? Okay, so We'll have to get with police on that part too, because we don't do that part, but.
Yeah, just what the code enforcement actually is for overflow parking there on easements and how that is actually, how that would be working in these processes.
Okay, so there might not be additional code work that we need to do, so much as clarity of policy perhaps, or.
Yeah, that's fine. We can work on it.
Okay.
I think you've already mentioned it, like the private property portion, we're not involved with that. It gets in, we have so many variables in the other areas, and we're basically complaint driven on those areas. So if we get something that comes up, we'll deal with it accordingly and see what type of zone it's in and see if it's within certain distances for us to enforce or not.
Okay. Yeah, some of the comments and stuff that have come through to me is, I mean, people don't want to come in and make all sorts of police complaints, right? Like, especially with neighbors and those sorts of things. I fortunately have some really nice people that want to work hand in hand with their community, and they don't want to create that sort of situation. But when things start being impacted, I just want to know what it is that they can or should be doing. And when we're looking at some of this stuff, we want to make sure that, you know, how is it actually being enforced, or is it at all?
Okay, great. Yeah, we can put our heads together and report back to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take a break here. It's 8:20. We're 20 minutes past what is in our workbook, the council guidance book. So I guess I would need a motion to move forward if you all want to continue forward to whatever, if you want to do till 9 o'clock, or if you want to do till it's finished, or what are your thoughts?
I'd like to get through all the first readings, Madam Mayor, if that's all right.
Okay, so until it's finished? Is everybody okay with that?
That would be my motion.
Okay, all right. So with that, we can continue on, and I believe, Councilman Henderson, you have a question?
Yep, thank you. So with the parking, is there any portion of that that's regulated by the Community Development Department? Like enforcement wise, or does that all go through the PD? That all goes through the PD, right?
Yes, we don't go out and check to make sure cars are parked correctly or to make sure that, you know.
But initially you would be approving or disapproving plans based on drawings and stuff like that?
Correct.
Okay.
All right.
I just wanted that clarification, thank you.
So you're going to bring this back then? Has everybody asked questions they want to ask? If so, I want to make sure that you have the direction that you need. Do you have any questions for the council?
I do have one question. I just want to clarify that the June 11th will be a public hearing for this, unless I hear any opposition to that.
No. All right. So we'll have 2 public hearings on June 11th. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members.
Thank you, Ashton. Nice job. Nice work. So moving on then to item number 3 under unfinished business, and that is the professional service agreement and for indigent defense services. And I know, Charlie, you're going to be taking this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Johnson. So first off, council, my apologies for the late material on this item. There is a story behind it. I won't go into the long story, but the short version is we're collaborating with 2 other cities, and it took a while to make a decision between all 3 cities. I was pushing to get it in the packet. That said, that's why I went out on Tuesday, and we wrote this up in a way where you could potentially take action on it tonight. I'm not requesting action tonight. If you want to take action on it tonight, it would be helpful, but it's not necessary. We don't have a contract attached to this item yet. So I wanted to just kind of walk you through where we are in the process. This does relate to the interlocal agreement that we signed with Anacortes, which we removed tonight because Anacortes has requested out of the interlocal agreement. They've done their own thing. But it's Anacortes, Mount Vernon, Burlington, and ourselves. So the remaining cities are Mount Vernon, Burlington, and ourselves. So those are the 3 cities looking at this agreement. We had 2 responsive bidders for indigent defense, and this would be a contract shared amongst all 3 cities. Since the decision was just made, at least amongst the city representatives, now we need to put that contract together and bring that contract forward. That's really what this action item is authorization from the council to enter into a contract so we can get these services going. The target date right now is July 1st. for having services fully being provided. The name of the firm is North County Public Defense. They provide services to cities up in Whatcom County and are looking to expand into Skagit. And there's a benefit to that in that having a footprint in both counties, they're a bigger firm, and we expected we'd have bigger firms submit for this. And we have caseload standards and pretty tight restrictions on indigent defense in our state. And it's important, very important, that the caseload standards are not exceeded by given attorneys. They have a maximum of 400 cases. So the more attorneys you have in your firm, the more flexibility you have to manage, particularly if you lose attorneys. And that's part of the story of our current firm, Mountain Law, who is essentially ceasing to exist in a few days. Their contract actually was extended and ran until the end of June. So we're going to have this gap month where we're going to have to manage potentially with North County Public Defense is trying to step in with some interim people, and we're trying to work our way through that, and we'll have some conflict public defenders assigned as well during that time. But we'll get through the month of June, and then by July, we need to have a provider working for us. So North County Public Defense was the most cost-effective bidder as well in this process, and the costs are going up. I'll just give you that heads up right now. We knew that. We had budgeted more money in the budget for 2025 than in 2024, and Mountain Law had done a deal with all three cities, definitely with us, where it was a fixed rate for 3 years, and then inflation took off, and I think that's part of their story, but we knew that that fixed rate at a low level was going to jump up whenever we had a new contract. And so that's part of what we're experiencing here. We also have new standards coming from the Supreme Court at some point. The Bar Association recommended new indigent defense standards to the Supreme Court, and they're considering those. We were hoping they would have made a decision a couple of months ago. We still haven't heard, so it's kind of an unknown. But we had bumped the budget up even further for 2026 to reflect that. Short story here, in terms of fiscal impact, is that we think we'd be right about on budget with this firm this year. And then for next year, we think it'll be close, but it's a little bit hard to predict, in part because what I have here for you is a worst case scenario where all the attorneys stay with the firm and their salaries move up a little bit and their costs move up a little bit. But the way this contract would be structured, if new entry-level attorneys were hired, our costs would come down a bit to reflect their salaries, so being lower. So these are kind of worst-case scenario numbers right now, with the caveat that the Supreme Court is going to do something at some point. We don't exactly know what that is. We know what was recommended to them. What was recommended to them would result in really high costs for everybody. That's why cities and counties across the state have pushed back against it. Estimate that we received recently was worst-case scenario. By 2028, we could be paying $800,000 a year for indigent defense. So there's a huge gap there we'd have to solve between now and then. But right now, that's a hypothetical. The short version of this is just we have a firm. We're going to be recommending to you a contract. This is kind of the first read on that. Wanted to take any questions council might have. We've been collaborating with the other cities. They'd have an office over in Burlington to start, and then they would move to Mount Vernon after that. And there's more to the story, but I'll stop there for now.
Madam Mayor, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Councilman Koch.
I really like this cooperative approach to share costs. I think it's the smart way to go. I am concerned about this state Supreme Court case. I've been following it in the media, and if I'm not mistaken, this has to do with caseloads, and that the caseloads are way too high. That means more attorneys, which is more cost. And I think I'd be cautious. Do we know when the Supreme Court might rule on this, or do we have any idea?
It could be any day now. We were hoping before we put the RFQ out amongst the cities that they would have ruled, so we could have set it based upon whatever those standards were, but that did not occur, and it still has not occurred.
Because I was on an AWC committee, and some of the smaller towns over in eastern Washington, they said depending on what the state Supreme Court would do, they'd go broke. And it's that dicey an issue, and I do appreciate the regional approach, and I think we have to give good representation to people, but we also have to watch the money. Thank you.
Okay.
Get over there.
Yes, go ahead, Councilman Henderson.
Can you scroll up just a little bit so I can see the top couple of lines above there? Okay, so if we agree to this, just get it done now because we're running out of time. We're not going to go over that 335, 750, right? That's our worst case scenario, right?
That's our worst case scenario.
Okay.
What I would pledge to you is we would come back to you if we think we're going to go over that. That shouldn't happen. Now, the one caveat is if the Supreme Court standards come out, we're going to have an opener anyway. We're going to come back to you anyway. So regardless, if we're going over that, we're coming back.
So we don't need to do anything. Would it help if we did something?
It would help. It would just make it more efficient because then we can just go negotiate a contract, get it done, and get it in place as soon as possible, which helps manage our transition.
So if that's our nightmare budgeted scenario and we just say yes, then that gives you the freedom to go get us a good number?
It would.
Okay. Does anybody?
I'm okay with that.
All right, I'd motion to do that.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion by Councilman Henderson, second by Councilwoman Diamond to authorize Mayor Johnson to execute a professional service agreement contract with the North County Public Defense. Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you all, motion carries. Moving on to new business, amendments to Chapter 2.9, Title 17 of the Sedro-Woolley Municipal Code to add regulations for cottage clusters. This is ordinance 209925, first read. Thank you, Nicole.
Of course. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. So tonight I'm bringing forward a first read of a proposal that you've been hearing about for quite some time. I believe it's a key step toward solving one of Sedro-Woolley's most pressing issues. It's our lack of diverse, attainable housing, especially targeting that middle housing income range. So no action is needed tonight, but I did want to walk you through the why behind why planning staff and the Planning Commission see this as such an effective tool. So through our comprehensive plan update process, especially looking at our land capacity analysis and our housing needs assessment, it became very clear that we're facing a significant imbalance in our housing supply. We're looking at an oversupply of traditional single-family homes and an undersupply of low and middle income housing options. So when we're talking about middle housing, we're talking about households that earn roughly 80 to 120% of the area median income. And housing for those households are hard to come by with the market as it is right now. What's especially hard to come by is housing for low-income families that are under that 80% threshold. So from the data, we were showing that we have a deficit of 754 units, meaning that the city does not, in its current capacity, have room for these units. So we've been looking at a number of different housing strategies to try to address that deficit and see how we can fill that gap. So cottage clusters are designed to help fill that gap. So it largely serves households in the 50 to 120% AMI range. Now it does, of course, depend on the ownership structure and meaning rental versus ownership. And then it does depend on the size and scale of the development and the initial housing types too, whether affordability incentives are chosen. There's a lot of variables with that. I did take a look at kind of feasibility analyses that were done for other jurisdictions that have incorporated cottage housing regulations into their code. And I can maybe share this information too. It was kind of a last minute search, but so looking at Milwaukee, Oregon, their cottage clusters are affordable at the 68 to 82% AMI. In the Portland area, you're looking at a number of different ranges, anything between the 28% to 84%. In Shoreline, their low end of things is about 80%, and the higher end at about 120. And then Langley they have valued their cottages at 80 to 120%. Generally, their cottage housing regulations are similar. So just looking at, there aren't very many readily available rental or price data for most cottage housing developments because it's such a new type of concept. So it's kind of hard to come by those anyway. So you'll see in the ordinance that I drafted up that I will like to add, once we kind of work these regulations into the land capacity analysis that we did already do, just to kind of see, based on these assessments and further research, kind of where that unit count might fall into for the 80%, 0 to 80% AMI range and 80 to 120%. So that way I can really show you kind of what we're going to be achieving by implementing these regulations. So, so cottage clusters, they provide modestly sized homes arranged around shared open space. They're perfect for the folks who earn too much to qualify for traditional subsidized housing, but also cannot afford what the current market has to offer. So the best part, I think, is they're designed to blend into our neighborhoods, preserving that small town character that we love so much here. So unlike apartments, these homes aren't going to tower over neighborhoods or drastically change the landscape. They're on the smaller scale, have the same design guidelines as any traditional single-family house would in the city, and they're focused on community. I like to think of them as kind of an evolution of the classic neighborhood, not a departure from it. And I think the two most important provisions to kind of point to are the unit lot subdivision provision. So that gives homeowners the opportunity to actually own the cottage as opposed to just renting it. So growing equity and stability while keeping the overall footprint modest and efficient. We've also incorporated adequate spacing and setbacks to the structures as well as other improvements on the site itself to make sure that these aren't going to be backed in like sardines situation, that they will, the families living in these homes will feel that they have space of their own. The open space being central to the design also helps to achieve that. Second, with the incentives for affordability, we've greatly reduced the fees for a developer who chooses to include affordable housing in the project. And you'll see in the ordinance, I did define permanently affordable housing as those developments that provide housing for those at 80% AMI or lower. So we're comfortable with these fee reductions. You'll see that we included some provisions if the developer chooses to incorporate 100% of the units in their development for permanent affordable housing, that they will be reduced impact fees for transportation. And the whole idea behind that is that the way that we've written these amendments, it really makes sure that the cottage cluster will be designed with utilizing the existing public street infrastructure that's already there where that's feasible. So that way, you know, if you have internal drives and those are owned and maintained by either the homeowners or an HOA that's established, that eliminates the need for the traffic impact fee, which it pays for the city's maintenance of public street infrastructure, right? So if you don't need the infrastructure, why pay for it? So if a developer chooses to do only 50% of the units for affordable housing, then their plan review fee is waived. So we're comfortable with those because of the existing infrastructure provision there. These cottage cluster developments, they generate fewer car trips. They don't trigger the same level of public investment that large subdivisions do. Yeah, so in addition, so we've structured the impact fee rates to reflect the actual demand that these homes would place on services. Smaller homes equals smaller fees. So the way that I've kind of designed this is modeled after the ADU code. So from the ADU code, if the ADU is between 205 and 450 square feet, it's assessed at 30% of the rate of a standard single-family home. Over that and up to 800 square feet, it's assessed at 50%. So this kind of follows a very similar model to where, I'd have to look at it again, but it's,
Nicole, how would these compare to it's a small housing development, it's up on Fruitdale Road, right across from the entrance into the Swift Center?
Wildflower?
Yeah,
Yes.
so how would these compare to those?
So the difference being you're limited at the 3 to 12 units within a cottage cluster. And we've also kind of made some provisions in the parking regulations there. So even though you can still use garage parking and on-site parking, what Wildflower did is they are allowed to use the public, it's a private drive is the situation, right? So they're not parking in a public street.
Right.
So each of those homes have been assigned one parking stall for each home on the street, and then one in the garage. And so that hasn't worked out very well. We actually get a lot of calls about parking enforcement situations there. So what I wanted to do is kind of give us a little bit of flexibility administratively to open up more parking, kind of with the visitor and overflow situation. So you'll see in the draft that I've written in that the director has authority to assign visitor and overflow parking as they see fit, depending on the size of the cottage cluster, the size of the units, those sorts of things. So it's kind of a flexible thing there. And I do require that the parking be kind of behind. So I want the housing and open space, landscaping, that sort of thing to be the thing that you see at the street frontage as opposed to a big old parking lot to serve everybody. So that would be kind of tucked behind, and we have some flexibility on how many stalls would serve.
And that's stipulated in there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Go ahead, Councilman
Yes.
Cox.
So I guess I like this concept. I think it's, we have to do the middle housing, and we're way behind in terms of the numbers that were shared. I guess my concern about the affordability is that I know Wildflower isn't technically cottage housing, but I have watched those prices of what they sell for, and it's like everybody else in town. The last 20 years, it's tripled. And I guess at that point, it's no longer affordable. So, I mean, what would incentivize a builder to do this aside, to make it affordable aside from just building a bunch of cottages, which is fine, but then he knows they're gonna, or she knows they're gonna go up in price. I mean, those are nice incentives, but if I'm a developer, I'm gonna try to make the most money I can.
Yeah. So
Councilwoman Keston?
Oh, I didn't know, did she, okay.
let me quickly.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So,
Sorry.
if you take a look at the definition for permanent affordable housing, and this comes straight out of the RCW for it. So permanent affordable housing means housing regardless of ownership for which there is a legally binded recorded document in effect that limits the price at which the owner may sell or restrict the occupancy of the unit to a qualified low-income household, 80% area median income or lower, for a period of at least 40 years for a property used for a shelter or rental housing, or for a period of at least 25 years for a property to be owned by a low-income household. These documents include, but are not limited to, affordability covenants, deed restrictions, or community land trust leases. Resale restrictions exercised by providers of permanently affordable housing can include, but are not limited to, continuous ownership of land by a public entity or nonprofit housing provider, with a lease allowing ownership of the structure by an income-eligible household, a non-possessory interest or right in real properties such as a deed restriction, restrictive covenant, resale restriction, or other contractual agreement that ensures affordability. So in reading that, I also wanted to bring to your attention to that the kind of fee study that I did, because something that the Planning Commission did ask at one point was what would a developer want? Why would a developer want to build a cottage cluster as opposed to just your standard multifamily apartment structure? And so that is a fair statement. So bringing the fee study to light, I wanted to kind of show that basically with the way that we have drafted these cottage cluster regulations, and the way that we've assigned the density calculations, and the way that we've assigned the scale as far as rates for impact fees and sewer connection, makes it basically on par with the multifamily apartment structure if they don't choose the affordability aspect of things. If they do incorporate that, then they're getting some pretty hefty reductions in their fees, at least for the permitting side of things. But I think it's a step in the right direction as far as what we can allow, and open up the zoning code for something that's different than what we have, which is single family and apartments. So.
Go ahead. Thank you. I appreciate the concept behind this. I have a few issues with it. One being that if you use wildflowers as an example, that would be an example of what not to do. It's miserable. My sister lived up there. The parking, you can't even get like a fire truck down there when you've got people parked here and people parked here. It's just a zoo. And then you've got the overflow now that they're parking over at the Northern State Recreational Area. But a couple things. I just see a cluster of, for what, 400 square feet, and the impact that it will have, because that traffic impact is not going to change if it's 400 feet or 900 square feet of a place to live. They are still going to be using their cars. They're still going to have the overflow of stuff that will not fit within that, so then they'll be adding stuff to the outside of it. It makes me sad because I was able to buy a house at 19 for $130,000, brand new, 2-bedroom. And now my child is more than likely not going to be able to buy a home. So I'm going to have to think about the ADU route, or, things like that. But when I look at this, and then seeing that some are exempt from paying traffic impact fees, plan review fees, that just gets shifted on to the people who are already living here and paying the taxes. And it really makes me nervous because I just see clusters of not really inexpensive places to live, but smaller. Almost, it reminds me of Hong Kong, and just high density. And that's not what we are here. Whether or not it's the 400 square foot or the apartment building that's the 400. I mean, I just have a huge issue with this concept. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. Councilman Burns?
I think Councilmember Cassidy just modified what I had to say. So I'm not necessarily opposed to reducing impact fees, but I would rather it be incentivized towards selling the homes as opposed to turning them into internal rentals. so that we do start increasing the market availability of entry-level homes for people like Councilmember Kesty's children or my own when they decide that they want to buy a place. It's not my favorite option for housing, but looking at what's out there, looking at the prices, I actually looked up Wildflower while we were talking, and just randomly picked one. $345,000 is the estimated value for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 908 square foot. When their information on this started, they were about 138,000. So it's a monstrous increase, and that has to do with supply and demand. If we have more supply than demand, price goes down. So, I mean, I don't want to change the character of our community and have monstrous apartment buildings going in. I think this is an option that allows people to get that foot in the door for home ownership, especially either a younger couple or a younger person who wants to buy something, or that aging person who's going, you know, I don't need this 5-bedroom house anymore. My kids are gone. It's time to downsize. But I would like to see something in here about the distance, car door to house door, door to door, what's the distance max? Because one of the things with Wildflower I was looking at when I drove through there was how far are some of them walking to get to their car and carrying groceries and all the other things that they have to do to get back and forth every time they grab something from the car and go back to the house. And you talked about having them behind, so if it's essentially a loop with a common area, that would make more sense to me. But I get what you were saying about having the forward-facing being the yard, but I see that also as a challenge for making parking very easy without having multiple routes into the building. I'm just having a hard time picturing that.
Councilman Cock, did you?
No, I was just wanting to make an observation that, so do we even have much room in the city for these kind of developments? Yeah, that's,
Yeah, so these really will primarily target infill development toward the core. You know, we don't have a lot of vacant residential lots in the city. That's the fact of it. Where we do have those more open lots and really readily available for development is kind of on the periphery. So where you'll find the most would be in the R5, residential 5 zoning. And I did think through that, you know, I hear you on the density. So I wanted to incorporate some provisions in there to prevent, you know, somebody subdividing their property into smaller sections and just, you know, here's a cottage cluster, here's one right next to it, here's another one. So essentially the whole property is another Wildflower, right? So there is a provision in here that you cannot have 2 cottage clusters within 1,000 linear feet of each other unless there is some sort of natural barrier or physical barrier of some kind that physically separates those clusters, so.
okay, thank you.
Councilman Henderson.
Sure, thank you. So the parking code that we just went over with Ashton, is that same parking rules going to apply to the cottage clusters? And if we did add this, would we have to add that to the code that he presented before we pass that one?
So I want Ashton's to pass first, and then I will add cottage clusters as a new unit type to his new section there. So,
But would we have to add that to his before we pass?
no, his could pass first, and we can amend his after the fact.
Okay. And then, so you said it's a minimum of 3 units, right?
Minimum of 3.
And a
correct.
max of 12?
Correct.
Okay, so like, and so when it states in the R15, right, we couldn't possibly have 15 on a 1-acre lot?
That's correct. no.
Okay. And then, on the subject, earlier tonight, some people made mention about building 15 they got a letter about building 15 units over there, and that's the first I'm hearing of that. Is that like within this code?
Nope. So, Family Promise has applied for a conditional use permit to construct 14 tiny homes behind the Central United Methodist Church at 1013 Pulte Road, with the intent of providing additional transitional housing options for families facing homelessness.
They're not permanent housing.
Not permanent housing, these are temporary, and so we don't have a code provision that allows this, but there is a state RCW that allows for an increased density allowance for properties owned by religious organizations who would like to provide housing for low-income affordable households. So it's something that, as long as they meet that state provision, they can do.
Okay. So back to the parking code, we would need to apply that amount of parking for, like, I say this is a 2-bedroom, because I think they like went up as big as 1,200 square feet, right? Which is, I mean, that's the same size of house that I live in, and
Correct.
I don't think my house is small.
Correct.
But so it'd be the 2 parking spots per 2-bedroom, same as it is written in the code, right? Like, his code still applies to your code, and vice versa, right?
So I'd want to take a look at that, because I started on this a lot longer before he worked on his. So this pertains more to the unit size rather than the bedroom count. So I can take a closer look at that and see if I'd want to match it up better with his provisions, or, yeah, let me take a look at this real quick, because, yeah, it scales up, but not exactly the same as how Ashton's code works.
Would it make sense to make it the same so it's uniform?
I don't see any issue with doing that myself. Where did it go? Thank you. Okay, so the way my parking reads, it's for dwelling units between 205 and up to 800 square feet. A minimum of 1 parking stall shall be provided. And then for units 800 to 1,200 square feet, that's 2 parking stalls. And I modeled that kind of off of how ADU codes are reading these days. I've seen a few ADU codes that basically have that exact provision. So I guess I'd like to hear feedback from the council on whether we want to keep this as kind of its own separate thing, or if you'd rather me work it into Ashton's table and have it scale in accordance with the bedroom count.
I guess my concern is not making it like wildflower. I just helped a friend renovate a house and sell it up there, and it was a disaster. Even parking in his own parking spot with a pickup truck, we needed like a Geo Metro to fit. And it just, if people are gonna be moving into these places, you know, and we're trying to make it affordable, they should still have like what everybody else has, you know, as far as the convenience of being like, okay, well, you know, we're a couple and we both own a car, we both need a place to park. I don't see people really growing a large family in these places, so it's not like their 3 teenage kids are all gonna have a car too. That's in a different neighborhood in town, but it'd be nice to see, like, if this is something that we can, you know, work in and have a couple of them that, like, they're still getting the same amenities that everybody else is. They're not getting a tiny parking spot just because they have a tiny house, I guess is my
Yeah,
thought
and
on
I
it.
tend to agree just for consistency's sake too. It's nice to have just, here's one table that works for every kind of housing development in the
Simple,
city. Simple, it's easy and I understand too. I don't have any problem with switching to the bedroom scale.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilwoman Diamond.
I just wanted to state that I also struggle with this reduction in traffic impact fees. I mean, we're talking about increasing parking spots and the impact fees, and that's one of the biggest complaints I get from constituents is the traffic that comes and goes through the city. So regardless of whether, you know, how much somebody may or may not be using it, the fact is you have 13 there, the roads are gonna be impacted, because those 13 houses did not exist there before, and now they will. So that area, the infrastructure might currently exist, but the amount of maintenance and the congestion and the additional things that go along with it will then also exist. So then I do struggle with some of that. I also struggle with a lot of this in the sense that development needs to be paying for development, because that should not be put, all of this stuff should not be put on the current constituents in the community that live here. And that's a huge, huge struggle, because we are constantly going in, I mean, to saying that, well, we can just raise taxes, or, well, we can get this out of an increase, if the council can vote to increase the sales tax. I think that was on the indigenous worst-case scenarios. Council could try to do that to fund stuff. Well, we need to stop asking taxpayers to take on the burden of additional issues. That's not their problem. Right now, they're just trying to survive. And so, the implications in all of this are difficult. I like the idea of trying to provide a hand up and trying to create an opportunity for some of this stuff. I also had posed a question when we reviewed the comp plan about whether or not this was actually necessary to fulfill our requirements, because we actually, with the change in state law, with the additional ADUs that could be required and all of that sorts of stuff, is this even a necessary situation? Because it's been presented a couple times as being a necessary thing that council more or less is going to have to move forward with. But I don't know that that's an actual reality. If council agrees to do it and it's organic, that's one thing. But if it's being pushed into something, I really don't like the fact that it was in the comp plan before it even came to council for discussion. I've been approached, the different people that have come about the church stuff that was talked about today. I have no idea. I've never seen that sheet before, what they were holding up and presenting, so I don't know what that was or how that was, but they were asked, but not them specifically, but other people had asked me if that was part of this cottage cluster we were going to talk about tonight. I have no idea. But it's really, I guess before we continue, as I'm trying to process this and understand it, in an area that's already becoming congested, I realize that the state really wants to put density in the city and is really, really, really pushing it, but there really does come a point where the city has to push back a little bit and say, you know what, this isn't even realistic, because it's not realistic and it's not right for the people that currently live here, and it's not healthy financially or for our infrastructure or for any of the situations. And so I guess I want to know, if this is even I realize this is up for discussion and it's going through the process and there's a lot of work involved in all of this, but is it even a necessary thing?
So, like I said, it's one of a tool in the housing strategies that we're trying to put together to kind of puzzle piece how we're gonna get there, right? So we have this deficit, 764. We need to figure out some way to fill that gap. So this is an attempt at that. And I'm trying to put together some numbers. I need to do some number crunching before I can really get those numbers to you as to what unit count we can be looking at estimate-wise for what this regulation, if we adopted it, would help achieve that gap that we have. So it's not like I'm saying this is required. It's one of several different things we'll have to do to try to meet that. It's a difficult place to be in, for sure.
But you can also, they also could be, so I can't remember, Nicole, if it was you or if it was Tom who actually sent out a link that showed across the United States the different cottage clusters that had been developed. And they really were quite beautiful, the way that these were done. These were really quite beautiful. Yeah, so they.
Some more beautiful.
Yeah, so I guess my question would be, I love that you've arranged it so that we can't have them one on top of the other, so that there is some space, there's a sense of privacy. But can there be stipulation to even design, so they're not putting up inexpensive-looking housing?
The issue that you get running, the issue that you run into when you start putting more strict design standards on any kind of housing is it increases the cost to build them. And then, you know, there's that perception, okay, I'm building a smaller house. It's the same as my neighbors, but they've got this, you know, 1,500 square feet. Mine's just this little thing, and I have all these regulations I have to meet. Why? When it's the same thing but smaller, right? So there's kind of this equality sort of issue that comes with that too. So that's why I made that choice to make it exactly the same design standard regulations that apply to any kind of single-family housing that goes up in the city.
Okay.
Just one comment.
Yeah, one more, and then.
Yeah, just real quick, just in support of this concept, I just think it's another arrow in our quiver of development that we can use if we have to. And I don't know who did it, it was a national network, did a story about middle housing. It's not cottage housing, but it's middle housing in Portland. And they really looked nice, and they interviewed this woman who said, I never thought I could own my own home, you know, and she can own her own home. And I like Councilman Burns's idea. I'd rather cottage housing, if it goes in, I'd rather it not be some developer who rents to everybody, but individually sold, because you would not only develop home ownership, right, for people, which is increasingly out of reach for many people, but you'd also be bringing property tax in too. So I like the concept, but I think maybe we need to keep talking about it.
Yeah, and that was the purpose for including the unit lot subdivision provision there, was opening this up for home ownership, because the issue you have when you have one large parent parcel and you don't create those individual lot lines, you've got to get complicated with condoizing things, and there's still an underlying property owner, and it's just weird. So it opens up several options for people. I kind of hesitate to limit it just to home ownership, just because I know that there is a rental problem too. You know, I can speak for myself. I rent a manufactured home, 1,200 square feet. No, not even that, 1,100 square feet, and it's $2,100 a month. It's pretty crazy. So, and I have a good job, and I can hardly afford that. You know what I mean? So, it's not just home ownership that's the problem.
Right. So this is the first read. It's going to come back to us.
Correct, yes.
And we appreciate you listening and taking in everything, the concerns and questions and whatnot. So is this going to come back on the 11th or later than that?
So thinking through comp plan stuff, you know, like we were talking about, this is just an arrow in the quiver. I'm not going to ask for action on this yet until we can kind of go through our housing strategies a little bit better. So I kind of want to just get things on the table for you all to consider. And then at some point we can maybe have a sit-down workshop sort of thing to really look at our options and have an understanding of what we're looking at.
So, just to clarify, so that these cottage units have nothing to do with what is the family promise situations at the churches. Those are
Correct, not
completely
related.
separate and unrelated. Okay, I just wanted to clarify and make sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, okay, so we're going to move forward. So we're averaging about 35 minutes. I don't want to be here till midnight. Thank you,
Heavy
people.
stuff, yeah.
So, yeah, so Nicole, thank you very much. You do beautiful work. We greatly appreciate you.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to item number 2 under new business, and that is the comprehensive plan draft, chapter 4, transportation element.
And that will be our Mr. Bill here, who is been working with our consultant team to update our transportation element for the comprehensive plan. He's got a slide presentation that he's put together. And are you ready to go, Bill?
I'll wait for Woody real quick. I promised to be briefer than I was going to be brief before. Next slide, Woody. So this is first presentation on the transportation element of our comprehensive plan. Before I really start into it, I'll just start by saying really the condition of our transportation system from both safety and congestion, the other things we're dealing with GMA, is actually in excellent condition overall. So this is the first major update since 2015. Of course, this is all designed to reflect the new requirements with the Growth Management Act that we're trying to meet. And really this is, part of it is, they're calling it a top-to-bottom refresh of our previous transportation element. But a lot of that also, our existing transportation element is also very well written. This will be my 4th or 5th transportation element I've updated since my career. So to me, it's a fairly typical solid transportation element that we're working with, but there are some different tweaks and updates we will have to do with this current adoption. Next slide. So a lot of a transportation element is really about traffic demand forecasting, and that's what the bulk of this presentation is about. But just kind of going through some of that as you start with a transportation system inventory, which outlines your existing facilities and functional classifications. Then you have your existing traffic conditions, which of course is traffic count. It also involves safety analysis and collision and that type of thing. It also involves freight counts and the freight impact in your community and how that works. Then you switch to what's called a travel demand forecast, which is really the traffic modeling and analysis to show how all that's integrating and how the system is working. And then with that is the tool you use to identify present and future capacity needs, any deficiencies, and how to develop projects to mitigate those. I will say, and we will go over this the next council meeting when we get into the 6-year transportation improvement program, but really the vast majority of our projects on our 6-year TIP are really safety and multimodal gap projects. So we're trying to usually close gaps in our sidewalk system and then make sure we have a clean overlay on the road as well that really focus on safety more than congestion. Next slide. So the first piece is our transportation system inventory, and involves all these different elements. Passenger car vehicles are actually the bulk of it, but it also involves highway freight, freight rail, public transit, and what they're calling now active transportation, which is really just another word for the old, it's just it's our newest version of saying multimodal transportation system, which is bicycles, pedestrians, and transit. And then it really reflects the current state of our system. The little map you have there is our functional classification system. So what that is defining what roads are arterials, collectors, local access, whatnot. The only major arterial we have in the city is Highway 20 until it gets to Highway 9, and then it switches to basically a major collector. Highway 9 is also a major collector to the south, and then we have Cook Road that becomes a minor arterial in the city and then becomes a major collector heading out of the city. So just kind of gives you an idea of how they've classified our network. That's done at a federal level, and it's necessary for different types of grant funding and that type of things that's available to us for improvements. Next slide. So existing traffic conditions, that, a lot of that involves, the traffic volumes, and we, in Skagit County itself does a very robust number. They contract with each of our cities, so Mount Vernon, Burlington, the larger cities, Anacortes, as well as Sedro-Woolley. And so we have the benefit for traffic modeling, keeping track of that inventory, about 15 to 20 years, depending on the city, of annual counts in the same location every year on a variety of our roads. We have some federal requirements for that as well, but what it does is it sets us up to be able to rather accurately deal with traffic growth, which is different than housing and population growth, but it's related. And it lets us set up for a pretty robust traffic model. And what our existing conditions in our traffic model shows is that we really have 4 intersections, and of course, council knows a lot of what those intersections are. We have 2 intersections that are, and you'll see this on the level of service slide on the next slide, I believe, but it's they're at level service E. So our standard level of service for urban areas is level of service D. And so Highway 20 and Metcalf Street, Highway 20 and Reed Street, and the roundabout we're about to build is currently at level of service E. When the roundabout goes in, it will improve that level of service so that it will not be out of compliance with general GMA right now. And a lot of these level of service E's are a low level. They're like just one traffic movement, usually a left turn is what's failing. And the others, especially the through traffic, both the major and the minor street, are actually okay. But that's part of what triggers that lower level of service. And then we have Cook Road and Trail Road as a level of service D, but it will be approaching E in the next 10 years easily. Next slide. Okay, so here's traffic demand forecasting. So the map, the relative thickness of those lines indicate the volume of traffic. So our highest volume of traffic is Highway 20. And then, as the lines get thinner, you generally have a smaller volume of traffic. Like F&S Grade Road, of course, is not very big. Cook Road is rivaling Highway 20. And then we have a couple of our other typical, what we consider collectors, which are Ferry Street and Jameson Road and Highway 9 and some others. But and notice all of those roads are green. So green indicates level of service C or lower. And for instance, Highway 20 is still a level of service C, although it carries the majority of our traffic. And a lot of that involves also whether you just have 2 through lanes or you have left turn pockets and right turn pockets, so that cars that would otherwise delay traffic can get out of the main traffic stream, and that's why they're still green. And then the 3 intersections I just mentioned that are red are level of service E, and then Cook Road and basically the intersection with Highway 20 and Highway 9 are currently at level service D. Everything else is actually pretty robust as far as a congestion management standpoint. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm not necessarily reading the slides to speak to you, but basically we use our traffic count history we have. So when you build the model is really based off of housing dwelling units. And then your traffic counts are using to calibrate that model to see if the model is predicting things properly. And part of running that model is you run it in the current year and see if the traffic counts that the model is telling you have match what you have existing in the city from your existing actual counts. And then once you've calibrated that, that's where you then add more. It's not population growth. Traffic models are actually based off of dwelling units and commercial units of property, because that's what your trip generator and trip attractors are, okay? So when I say population, talking about traffic is unit growth, not people growth. It's just kind of a nuance. But then as you add that growth in, then that's how you predict how much more traffic you're going to have on your road system in the future, and then that is how you then build projects or build mitigation of those types of things. And that's what we use our traffic impact fees for. Next slide. So now we're going to kind of switch to our existing traffic conditions pertaining to safety. So a couple things to talk about that is our citywide collision rate is actually very low. Just a little bit of kind of education on that. The way you kind of compare apples to apples on high volume roads to low volume roads is they have a measurement called collision per million vehicle miles or million vehicle trips. So in the county, you'll do million vehicle miles because they have lots of mileage. Cities, you usually use million vehicle trips because you're usually talking about intersections. You don't have a mile of road to measure. And so as a little bit of a metric, okay, 3,000, a road that carries 3,000 trips a day is a million vehicle miles a year. So 3,000 times 365 is about 1 million, just to kind of give you that idea. We have about 12,000 trips a day on the highest part of Highway 20, okay? Then you have this other measurement called a I'm sorry, I shouldn't look at the slide. So we have high accident locations and high accident corridors. A high accident location or corridor is considered to be about 6 accidents per million vehicle miles. In this town, like many towns our size, we have overall citywide about 0.2 accidents per million vehicle miles. So 1/12 of what a high accident rate location would look at. That's what WashDOT uses when they have serious accident, high fatality locations, is they're looking at 6 accidents per million vehicle miles. We're far lower than that. We do have our hot spots, and this outlines the hot spots that we've had in the last 4 to 5 years, but our crash frequency has decreased in the recent past, and we kind of hope to continue that. But that's a measure of the state of collision rate in our city, and it actually is excellent. But we always strive to make it better. That's part of why we participate in the Washington Target Zero program. Next slide. Okay, so some of the other sections with GMA that we're required to deal with. One of them we've cities, counties, and other transportation agencies like Skagit Transit and other things really have been doing intergovernmental coordination since about 85. But with those other agencies we're coordinating with, of course, is WashDOT SCOG, which is Skagit Council of Governments, Skagit County, Skagit Transit, and our neighboring cities as well. And that's also how we also leverage federal funding for the entire region as well, as we very closely coordinate with those types of regional players, both at the technical advisory committee level and the policy advisory committee level at SCOG. Transportation demand management is another big thing with GMA, but we don't really fall into that too much. Transportation demand management are strategies to reduce congestion. And we're all familiar with what they are, but reviewing them quickly is like park and rides, for instance, so that people can drive fewer vehicles on the road. Transit is another big one, and we certainly do have some of those in the city, and we certainly have good service with Skagit Transit. Others you're familiar with is in more urbanized areas. When you're entering the I-5 and the freeway, you have those stoplights that meter the traffic going on. That's a huge benefit that they discovered about 20 years ago. That's why they are in several places. We'll probably be getting one in Mount Vernon. I gotta stop spitting into the mic, I apologize. We're probably getting one at Mount Vernon or at the College Way intersection, just because of the congestion that starts going over the bridge heading north. And then the other one people are often familiar with when you're in other areas is the variable message signs going to the border that tell you what the border weights are, so you can make your choice of where to go, or what the travel time is to various cities heading south towards Edmond and Seattle. Those are ones we're familiar with. There's some other things, tools they use as well, but they really don't pertain to Sedro-Woolley as much, just because we're a more rural community that doesn't have that heavy urbanized traffic. And then we have new active transportation requirements. a lot of what this is, we have to add it into our concurrency management, so it's no longer going to be the impact of how many vehicles you're impacting the roads in the peak hour. That's what the traditional concurrency management GMA has been. Now they're adding in the active transportation or multimodal. And a lot of what that is trying to prevent gaps in our sidewalk, bike lane, those types of facilities. And they're all over every city as well. But part of this is, I'll give you for instance, if you have a developer building a plat and they basically only improve the frontage they have on the main road, whichever main road that may be. But beyond their plat, there's a 200-foot gap behind our entire sidewalk system. Under this, they'll be required to mitigate that and close that 200-foot wide gap and potentially do it like a latecomers clause. So if somebody else comes in between, they'll pay their fair share. But the idea is they're trying to eliminate the gaps that traditionally have happened in the past. So that's part of the trends. Sorry, that's just bugging me. That's part of the strategy that they're trying to promote with these new comprehensive plans coming up. Next slide. Okay, so some of our next steps is to do a full review of all of our goals and policies. We've already done a precursory review, and then of course add the different rulemaking behind the goals of policies for what I just talked about, the active transportation gaps we want to try to prevent and stop those things from occurring. And then we have a few different agencies, both WSDOT, SCOG, and others that will review our goals and policies and our transportation element itself to see, make sure it's complying with all the different checklists they have for meeting the new GMA requirements. And then we have our future conditions analysis, which I talked a little bit about in some of the previous slides, which will tell us, where our additional hotspots are going to follow. One thing I forgot to mention on the level of service where we had some of those intersections, Highway 20, that were failing. Part of that is to really reevaluate those in about 5 years after we get the Jones-John Liner undercrossing completed, so that we have a complete parallel corridor of Highway 20. Those hotspots may change. And so rather than although some of them are projects that we've put in our 6-year TIP this round, but that's dynamic process, and when we create that critical link that Mike Freiberger started, that is going to change travel patterns and hopefully spread them out more evenly throughout the city as we grow. Next slide. Is that done? Nope. Shoot. Okay. So part of this is creating those future transportation system needs that comes out of the forecasting model and analysis. And then the other thing, 6-year TIP is a big part of that, is coming up with our financing model to make sure that we can pay for the steady rate of projects we want to carry forward in the future to both mitigate safety problems as well as any congestion problems coming up. And so, and that's part of what will be refined in basically our next draft, our second read for all this. That stuff is being developed next as we speak. Now, next slide. Hey, I think I'm under 20 minutes. Is there any questions? I know that was a lot real fast, but that's basic. Those are the basics of a transportation element that complies with GMA.
I don't see any questions, so would it be possible for the council to contact you if questions arise, either you or even Peter, to get those questions answered regarding transportation?
Yes, ma'am, always.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
And just the note on that I meant to say this. All of our elements that we're looking at here do go to the Planning Commission first. So Planning Commission did see the transportation element one time, and they'll see it again after at their next meeting. I think at their June 10th, they'll see it again. So sometimes they see it once, sometimes they see it twice, but they always see it before you see it first.
Okay. Very good to know. Thank you very much, Tom. And it looks like you are up next. Am I looking at this correctly? the comprehensive?
Yes.
Yes, okay. go
Okay,
ahead.
thanks, Mayor. And I'll make this quick. So this requires no amendment to the budget. This is an additional scope of work affecting the work plan itself, and that's for an additional $30,000, most of which affects the climate element, but it's for meetings to do the Environmental Policy Act checklist and analysis and policy integration. Just a reminder that our original budget for the comp plan part was $89,000, and that was our grant for the, or excuse me, that was the contracted amendment. For the, excuse me, the climate element, we did get a grant for $500,000. By the time it's all said and done, we'll probably use about $350,000 of that, so we won't be using all of that. But all of this is covered by the grant, so there's no additional funds that come from the city for this.
So that, okay, go ahead, Mayor.
Go ahead,
Okay,
go ahead,
thank you.
yes.
So the additional 30,000 is coming from the climate element?
Yes.
Directly, so that it's coming from the climate element, but what's it going to?
For the climate element part of the comp plan.
Okay.
So there were two grants. One was for the regular update of the comprehensive plan, and then this other part came along afterwards. So they provided funding for that too, and that part is the climate stuff that we've got to address.
So we're just adding 30 to the.
30 to the already existing that we're gonna that we are going to spend on it. So by the time we're all done, I think we estimated 319,000, or we're under contract for that. It'll probably be 350,000 by the time we're done with that.
Okay, so we're just adding what we originally contracted with Facet for,
Yes.
but we're within what the
But we're-
state gave us of the 500.
That's correct,
Okay,
yes.
a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion? So we have,
I just have, so with the remaining money, is there anything else we can do with it, or are our hands tied?
Oh, that'd be nice.
We looked into
No,
this.
they hold the bag of money, and then we have to submit our invoices for the work that we've done and show that how we've used that money, and then they reimburse us that. So
Okay.
we can be creative and have been, but we can only be so creative before
Yeah, I
we.
remember the discussion.
amok.
We were hopeful we could use it on the sewage treatment plant, but we
Yeah, and unfortunately, we couldn't do that. And there were some other project ideas too. So we were constantly checking back with the state to see, well, would this qualify or not? I mean, there were always good questions. And Bill had some ideas for use
Yeah,
of that
or-
money too,
or
but we
even
couldn't do it.
stormwater or
Yeah,
something like
our
that.
stormwater improvement plan, is that still out of the question?
Yeah. That's a separate funding thing, yeah.
so we have a motion by Councilman Henderson, second by Councilman Koch. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And that is for a authorization to amend the comprehensive plan update and the climate element contract with Facet with this revised scope to work for an additional $30,000. And all those opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to, oops. The award authorization, I do believe.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead.
So this should be pretty quick as well. One thing I just want to say is earlier, a couple months ago, I was advising council, I was worried about the state of bidding in the state and whatnot. Fortunately, both of these contracts I'm going to talk about, we got very favorable estimates there. We're under the engineer's estimate, so very surprising, and I'm extremely happy about it. So the first one is a contract with Excavation West, who was our low bidder for our 2025 paving program in the amount of $1,067,101.82 was their low bid. They are also the contractor on Olmsted Park, so we gained some efficiencies with them already being in town. Any questions?
Yes, go ahead, Councilman Henderson.
So this is township from Highway 20 to State Street. So PUD's just got finishing up replacing a water line under that roadway. I mean, the project's just been a disaster for traffic. So they're gonna pave that, and then we're gonna come back through and
Well,
we're gonna.
they paved their patch on it, sorry.
Yeah.
So they paved their patch on it, and we're gonna basically grind 2 inches and pave over the whole thing, which will give us a superior repair to that patch, because that patch would wear out over time and create potholes. So that was why they did that project first. We coordinate with PUD and other utilities, so if they have any dig outs or anything to do, they do them before we come through, because they're not cutting that pavement for 5 to 6 years after we're done.
I'd make a motion to approve this.
Do have one more thing before we
Yes.
continue to vote on it. Just curiosity, are we gonna wait long enough that the asphalt gets to sink in before we grind it after they do there? Because I've noticed that that's a common thing that happens with asphalt after you lay it. They don't mound it quite enough to make it end up flat.
We actually watchdog them very closely to get superior compaction before we approved them, before they left, so, and to make sure they have the right thickness.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm sorry, the motion again was by whom? Henderson? And seconded by? Me. Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion by Councilman Henderson, seconded by Councilwoman Diamond to authorize the 2025 pavement and pedestrian improvement project. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, now moving on to award authorization for the Township Street, SR9 and John Liner. McGargyle?
So again, this is for the contract to build the roundabout on SR9 and John Liner Road. Low bidder was SRV Construction, who's done several projects in the city, in the amount of $2,329,741.50. And again, this is below the engineer's estimate, so we're very pleased with this price.
Any questions for Mr. Bullock?
Actually, I've got a motion.
All right.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Councilman Burns, second by Councilman Koch, to authorize the mayor to award SR9 John Liner McGargyle Roundabout Project Contract 2025 PW 18 to SRV Construction, Inc. of Anacortes, Washington, in the amount of $2,329,741.50. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Okay. Motion carries. I didn't know, Tom, if you wanted to address, it says information only, but did you want to address that, the summary planning?
Just to point out, that it's there, and please review it, because we'll be talking about those topics again later.
Okay.
This is just summary feedback. Our consultant does those summaries after each meeting, so it's helpful to see what
Very
the other
good.
commissions are saying.
Appreciate you adding it. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay, with that, we have completed new business and the information, moving on to executive session. And this is for discussion of legal counsel about current or potential litigation. This falls under RCW 4231101I. Emily, how long do you think we will require?
I think it's pretty short. Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just a update, like 10 minutes, maybe?
Yeah, 10 minutes
5
is what I
minutes?
was thinking as well.
Okay, so it's 9:36 right now. We'll be back in 9:46. Thank you.
I'll pull it back.
Thanks. Sit too long.
Yep, that's all right.
Getting started, so there.
That's okay.
Come on.
Nicole,
Are you out?
can you,
Are you leaving?
hey, Bill?
No, no, go.
Can you stick around till we come out? Thank you.
tailgate the city, they'll park in front of the laundromat all day, because that's the closest way to their door. It's just ridiculous.
I'm just
I
trying
am
to wrap
seeing
my
some
head
good
around all these
work ethic
jurisdictions that are just
from
getting
the
rid of
city
the
council,
parking stickers altogether. That's nuts. Well, thank you, Phil. What'd you
I don't
think
give,
about the cottage stuff?
it's progress, it's good. They have, on the, not just the cottage one, the other one where the accessory dwelling one, they have that law in there where, the rule in there where you have to live in one. So you can't take off and rent it out while you're gone and stuff. Let's throw rain barriers all around.
That'll be going away though.
Yeah, so I don't know.
My prediction is gonna go away, and then, in about 2 to 3 years, we're gonna figure out how freaking terrible it is, and it's not doing what it's intended, and it's gonna go right back.
They widen
Or
the,
somebody's gonna somebody bigger than us is gonna, challenge it.
they widen the, highway, goes past, under the, by, the bridge there, railroad bridge. But they could have widened it, made 5 lanes, and the traffic, I mean, what would that cost compared to the roundabouts and going under the railroad tracks and then another roundabout and buying the properties, the houses?
There's a company called BNSF.
Yeah, but they still are still doing it further down.
Oh, no, it's further down, they are also minimizing it.
Yeah. Narrowing it up.
Causing me challenges and stuff. But it's, yeah.
I've tried to deal with from Northern, and you get the runaround everywhere you go.
I've made an attempt or two, successful myself, so it's like, it doesn't matter who you are.
In all the solid relationships I've built with retirement,
You know, I've asked the city where they got the permission to go through for the library, that corner there. The city just did. There you go, but have first possession, yeah. But they put the traffic by, there was no traffic. There's two properties that service, if at all. My neighbor's property was a address on Reed Street. That was all one property. He had access, I had access. So, but why is all this traffic coming by me? I'm damn near being hit out there and cars flying by me. It wasn't necessary. They had the money to spend there, but they can't put sidewalks in places, and they came through, took the tracks out. The city did. It took them a week. It's not their property, it's not their tracks. Why are they doing that, period? And then they could have put that work into sidewalks somewhere, like by the little store down there on State Street. There's that dirt track. You got the new sidewalk over here, dirt. But I think that's the plat map that screws that up. And the plat was out there further, so it's like, that's not city property. What I've seen,
Parsec, right away is.
Right of way is just private easement. It's an easement. Yeah. Well, it is. I've gotten all the paperwork and everything. It's an easement. Which, when it disappears, adjacent property owners are supposed to get that property.
Dedicated, right-of-way easements are different from the standard easements as well.
Not what I've been reading. Because like, where I'm at, in the city, that was never given to the city. The plat map says that, and the courts have said that. But yet, and the city was notified, they don't have that for public use. So how can you just come in later and take it for public use? You can't. Because they were notified that on their deed, which is the plat map.
I don't know how much of those details of that.
Yeah, well. But, the appellate court said that plat map is what it says. It was never given to the city. It states it on there. The city does not own the land under these roads. I've looked at thousands of laws. I've spent 1,000 hours in the law library. I've been museums, taking pictures, tons of stuff. I just don't know how to present this in court. That's what screwed me over for this long. I can't present myself in court. I didn't have money to go take it to court. The city had all the money in the world. Your money. My money. Yeah. Even my money. But they're supposed to be protecting me too. They're not. Well, that's why I'm here all the time. Sorted out, coming in here. I don't know what decisions they're making. They come out and they bought the iron skillet. You know, bought the iron skillet. Nobody knew about it. What? The library's getting expanded. Well, what input did we have? None. The fees were, that was it. They bought that. Okay, no big deal. There was no mention of going by new with anything. Then I see a new drawing with crayon with an arrow pointing out there. That was my notification of what they were doing. And it's just record on their plans. But there was no communications about the library. Because they just expanded it and changed parking, everything. Everybody's like, yeah, okay, this one. And then, boom, it's different. And what do you want in it is what the meetings were, not to rearrange room. Not if you wanted a bigger one or anything, you're getting it. And that seemed like it was against the grant money laws.
Hello, I'm being security while everyone else is in executive session, so I'll be here for about 5 more minutes or so. Yeah. Oh, thank you. It's a really good question. Sure. I'm glad. So yeah,
Yeah, nobody's happy with that. Nobody knew they were gonna do that. Actually, heard people also be pissed.
it's called talk.
Well, the powers that be had to get the county money.
Something about like
And they wanted to
Trump's
spend
getting
that
back
and
and
make a new library. The place they put it, right up by the,
Okay.
It is 9:46 and we are back from executive session. There were no decisions made. With that, and if there is no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.